Okay, I don't want to become a streaming channel, but I wanted to do this for a while. I was making a video, but okay, so it's this guy, Fennekin Fox 326. I've watched his video on off, and I know that he likes to rage bait people. Like, bro, what the fuck? I don't like how he likes the things I also like. He got popular for rage baiting people and saying Deltarune sucks. He was probably the first one to push the Deltarune sucks movement, because I've been seeing Deltarune hate videos more and more. Hate. Let's see. What? No. Yes. Explaining why chapter 5 failed. I hate the Deltarune. No, wait. This is probably a different kind of video. Yeah. People hate it. Man, I really don't get the hate. It seems pretty stupid. Okay. So, the video I wanted to watch, it's this one. Deltarune chapter Deltarune chapter 3 and 4 are still terrible. I don't know what to expect. The preview I had watched up to 13 minutes, but it was quite a long while ago, so I don't really remember. Also, it's not a coincidence that this guy is also an Undertale Yellow fan. Why does Paper Mario appear? This is not what I clicked the video for. Why is that the first thing that appears? Okay.
Chapter 3
Anyway.
and 4 of Deltarune are beyond a disappointment. They're an insulting, meandering slog that picks up the shattered remains of every positive trait established in Chapter 1 and turns them into dust, or I guess blood now. Of course, I have to start by talking about everything I love.
Does it work? Okay, finally. I don't know what happened. It just suddenly broke. Okay. What I was saying is that I chose this video and not the other videos because I think chapter 4 is my favorite chapter, and there is a lot of things. There are a lot of things wrong with the first 2 chapters. Well, the first 3 chapters. I've got some criticism myself for them, but like chapter 4, I don't know. Maybe we'll say that like chapter 4 is all about prophecies and not and like it's all about stuff that happens later on the game, and like I don't know, we'll say like it's boring or something, or it's useless. Dude, so many new Deltarune hate videos are popping up. So many. By the way, want to know something people who make essays nowadays do? Is that they will make essays unnecessarily long. Like, look how long this is. 2 hours. 2 hours and 30 minutes. That's a fuck ton of time. And the reason why some of them do this is because if you keep watching, like at a certain point, you just want to turn your brain off, and you will stop questioning what the guy says to you. Like you will stop questioning his opinions. You will stop like asking questions. Wait, but doesn't this contradict his, etc. Like I think it's a tactic as well. Wait, okay, it's not. No, not necessarily engagement bait.
The first place.
Wait, it doesn't work. Wait. My audio. I don't know why my microphone broke. What should I do?
Like what Deltarune fans said.
Okay. First of all, I was making a video debunking Deltarune theories. This is my first video on Adobe Premiere Pro. Okay. Yeah, from what I remember, he liked Glaive Chapter 1 a lot. This guy is Deltarune Chapter 1's strongest warrior. Which, well, the Glaive was mostly about the king, but honestly, yeah, he was a good villain, and then he got turned sort of a gag, but still, I don't think it's that big of a criticism. Alright.
This because they cannot fathom someone not just unconditionally loving Deltarune. I deeply love everything about Chapter 1 and still do to this day because it was an entirely different game compared to what we have now. And I would have loved to see the game continue in its direction. I have literally modded the entire game, Chapter 1 and 2, creating new scenarios and characters solely for my friend group because I enjoyed its original foundation that...
Wait, what is this, dude?
Scenarios and characters solely for my friend group because I enjoyed its original foundation that much. Deltarune Chapter 1 mocked the naive childish beliefs Undertale had through a character based on the most important character in Undertale. A character that encapsulated every one of Undertale's morals and messages, Ralsei. A character who by the end of the chapter goes back on everything he once believed, admitting this is not a world where everything can be solved peacefully, something unfortunately walked back on in future.
The few times you're ever forced to fight anyone is when they're seemingly acting against their own will, like tonight. Huh? Acting against what? Or if there are mindless creatures acting out of things? Yes. This was something the king was recontextualized to doing. Until before stated that the fountain made him act that way in chapter 1. Huh? Wait, when was this stated? I don't remember that. Huh? Was king from Deltarune acting out of acting how is it? Against his will or something. yeah, it's from his own will. I don't get it.
Chapters. Susie was his counterpart, learning that the opposite of always
Yes,
being on
this
guard
is
isn't
true.
either. The
They
king was
were
such a
very
fantastic villain
contrasting
in chapter
characters.
1 because he was right. Everything he did, despite being morally in the wrong, was the right thing to do. The lives and well-beings of all Darkners live in direct opposition to Lightners. They were cast into darkness by Lightners, lived purely to entertain them, and now Light Warriors wish to finally end all of their lives by sealing all of the fountains. Something the king is fighting against happening. His only downfall being that the rest of the Darkners are either too simple or too cool to care. The protagonists are naive to believe there's any sort of compromise or discussion to be had, and he took advantage of that naivety in a way that was funny, shocking, and almost resulted in your death. He was diametrically opposed to you in a way that was engaging and made you question yourself, your motivations, your actions, and the
So
people
far,
around
so
you
good.
you were siding with.
What the
It showed
hell?
complexity that made Undertale's story and message look like the childish dribble it was in comparison. It left us with the promise of a world and narrative that was
Wait,
unabashedly
I'm very curious. What does he think Undertale's message is? Because I feel like he thinks Undertale's message is like killing people is bad. A lot of people wait Undertale think that is Undertale's
matured
message.
with us instead of just being more of the same. A world where not every antagonist would be a quirky goofball deep down that really just wants to be your best friend. And Chapter 2 undid all of it, entirely centering itself around the quirky quote-unquote villain that only serves to make you engage in her silly antics instead of being an actual threat. And gets immediately forgiven for all of her violent, downright horrifying actions because she didn't know what she was really doing, Lamau.
That's fair criticism.
Their morality regressed to become even more shallow than Undertale's, something Chapter 1 spent mocking, parading around the actions the king made in Chapter 1 to have just been him acting grumpy and out of character, even though he was entirely justified and right.
No, it's true. I think Queen should have been more of a serious antagonist. She's only really serious at the very end of the chapter, which is a shame.
With actual setups and punchlines. He was the son of a tyrannical king and became friends with the enemy. It showed a level of depth and history to Darkners beyond just Azrael. He served the important purpose of lowering Susie's guard and making it so when he betrays her for the sake of his father, it hurts even more. It was a vast improvement over everything seen before, but it's also why he shouldn't have come back in future chapters. He had already served his entire purpose perfectly.
Yeah, I don't really care about Lancer past chapter 1, but it's really not a big issue.
For the sake of jokes that fall completely flat. Susie was my absolute favorite. I've already
pretty sure he felt King's message was some people, yeah. And King being revealed cannot be a threat. Oh, maybe. I don't know. So far, I don't think I can conclude something like that.
I'll argue about it again probably in a later segment. Right now, I just want to explain.
I'm just gonna wait and see what he says.
Honestly, the whole thing has become exhausting, but I bring it upon myself. Back in Chapter 1, her character was vague enough, and honestly still is, to be interpreted as an unabashed bully, ostracized from her peers, and driven to the absolute edge. She was physically violent, hated you and everyone else's guts, and thought the world would be better off with you dead. She was done, sick of it all, already on the verge of getting expelled and wanted to get it all over with in a way that left a mark. It was unclear whether or not she would have actually gone through with killing Chris if she didn't care about how it would impact his mom. But if it was an on-the-spot decision for her, then it would have been a massive butterfly effect that evolved into the growth you see in the Dark World. She was a realistic, relatable depiction of a teenager that was allowed to be truly cruel, her motives unknown, possibly stemming from abuse, compounded by the years of antagonism between her and her classmates, as shown in the ARG. An emotionally complex character that was allowed to be truly violent and mean to everyone around her without inherently being a bad person. She was a multifaceted character that evolved on Undertale's simplistic morality, where no one was truly evil, and if they didn't...
Okay, Flowey was the only evil character in Undertale, and he was revealed to be acting against his will without a soul. This is not true. What are you talking about? That's not true. He was not acting against his will. Yes, he didn't have a soul, and that motivated him. That was like an excuse to be evil and do whatever he wanted. But like, that's not acting against his own will. What do you mean? Alphys is the closest to a character that did something evil. Yes, but she never intentionally wanted to cause harm to anyone. I mean, Asgore did kill some children. are we forgetting about that? Also, Kara. Kara literally manipulated Ezreal. Like, I'm pretty sure that's very evil. That's very evil, dude. She used that subject that were already dead. Well, I guess so.
Questionably bad things, it was against their will.
But
At this
still,
point, it's
what?
unclear if any of that was intended.
I
because
think
of how
this guy
often she's
hasn't played
portrayed as a
Undertale
joke
in like
future
7
chapters
years
and her
or
recent
something.
spelled out simplicity as a character. But even if none of that was intended in Chapter 1, it was still a positive that all of it could be extrapolated. If Toby didn't want to go in that direction at any cost, the fan comic Paper Trail shows a far smoother and more satisfying transition between the two
Why?
ideas that I
Why
wouldn't
are you
complain
bringing
about.
up
At
fan
the end of
comments?
Chapter 1, she certainly opens up more, but I never
I'm really
expected
confused.
it to
Is
double,
this
triple,
guy
and
like
quadruple
into
down by
Deltarune
making her
community?
everyone's
Because
glorified big sister. I
because
assume she-
like I don't get it. Is he into Deltarune fandom, Undertale fandom, or something? Because he made so many videos about the Deltarune hate, like Deltarune, Undertale Yellow, even. Like, there's so much. Chapter 1 ruled Deltarune, Chapter 2 ruined Deltarune, Chapter 3 and 4 suck. But also, one of his first videos were about Undertale. I really don't get if he's like into community and actively interacts with it, or like. Also, why does he have this as his banner? This guy is definitely rage baiting. Because Paper Mario Sticker Star is a very hated game. People. Yeah, make up your mind, bro. Paper Mario Sticker Star is a Metacritic, yeah. It's the most hated Paper Mario game. Yeah, it's 7.5, but yeah, it's very mixed. Some people hate it. Like, it makes many people angry because some people say that it ruined the series, which I don't agree with. But why does he have this as his banner? Honestly, I really don't get what what this guy's side is. Let's see his post. As easy and admittedly satisfying will be to co-stuff things out. Yeah. I'm going to take my time with the inevitable review. Yeah, this guy definitely. He definitely didn't enjoy chapter 5. look at how many comments there are. Holy crap. 967. That's crazy. The new villain is a soft anime guy. Yeah. What's the best part about chapter 5 was this price of raw things, so you could shut in order after hearing a guy and chapter 3 or a lot of time. Yeah, chapter 5 is quite hated. So I'm pretty sure it will be probably his best received video, because I modified the thumbnails. Yeah. The whole thing sucks. Thing was a reference to film. Like, I think this time more mixed opinions. What? No. Huh? Okay, dude, look at the comments. 500 comments and 100 likes. Holy crap! What? Talking about a scene not having the emotional impact it had after being edited to be less graphic. 10. Immediately making a rape joke about the same scene is absolutely wild. Like, I really don't believe you genuinely care about the emotional weight of the scene if you're willing to talk like that. You can't unrape the dough. Wait, can I say the word rape? I don't know if I can say that. Why would you think a rape joke about a teen character is funny? Oh, so that's okay. So that's what it did. Yeah, it's not a good thing to do. You shouldn't do that.
go back to being more of a reserved recluse when put into life-threatening situations
Okay, back
or
to
when
the
forced to be
video.
around her classmates who've mutually hated her for years, just with the tendency to open up a little bit more to those around her. She lost the dark and morbid edge that made her such a unique and complex character unlike anything in
Do I
Undertale.
put the
Post Chapter
subtitles
1, she
on?
has literally become the beacon of morality for the entire cast, including Birdley, Noelle, Tenna, and especially Ralsei, giving them life lessons on why it's okay to be who they are and that they're valued by those around them. She's entirely regressed into an Undyne Jr., a character who I never liked in Undertale due to her being loud and obnoxious, with an easily repeatable catchphrase of her shouting "Nya," sharing the exact same overexcited personality, loud and obstructive demeanor, and exact same
I
facial
like
expressions.
Undyne.
But even Undyne was shown to have a better explanation as to why she treats other people with the care she does than Susie does now. And just like Undyne, she went from being genuinely intimidating to being portrayed as a joke at every given opportunity. Everything that was once great about her character has been plucked away with surgical
I mean, there
precision.
just aren't enough opportunities to like really give her more serious moments after like becoming friends with you. Why would she have more serious moments? Why would she like try to kill you or something after becoming friends with
It
you?
wasn't character development to have her lose the depth she previously had. It's obviously easier for fans to
Some people
dismiss
have
Alpha
defended
as
it by saying Toby has had the idea for Deltarune and has its character for him. Why that's definitely not the case later. This is not a good defense, by the way.
just a facade and insist she was just an uwu innocent small bean who'd never actually do anything wrong and just wanted friends, because it's far less emotionally challenging and more in line with how Undertale and other modern media treat its
But that's
characters,
not
like Jax. Ew, disgusting.
You are my playthings, and I get joy out of making you suffer.
It'd be harder to kin Susie
Okay.
and make fan art of her if she actually did bad things at some point. That would be scary. It's an insulting dismissal of her actions and emotions previously displayed just to make her more appealing to a wider audience.
Just to make her more appealing. Holy crap. Dude! Like, okay, I think Toby Fox has gotten more commercialized over the years, but still, like, to make her more appealing, bro is not a businessman. I don't think when writing Susie, he had the idea of like selling merchandising. I don't think that's what he has got in mind when creating stuff.
Those who originally accepted her for who she was in Chapter 1. The only time it was clear she was ever doing it to make someone stop bothering her was when she gets sick of Lancer for the first time, but I never took that as meaning everything she had ever done was for the same reason. A lot of it comes down to what lines of dialogue you prioritize, the humorous or the serious ones, and how you interpret the rushed ending to her arc at the end of the chapter. I prefer the interpretation that the scenes where she was
Rushed? I mean, I don't think it's rushed.
Struggle for her,
I think she had enough reasons to change into a better person. Sure, maybe
of course,
making her the moral compass of the game was not a good choice. I agree with that. Maybe it was too early, but still. There are more of these, but I'm working on it. I mean, yeah, that's true.
Fans ironically hate Chapter 1 and everything it stands for in retrospect. There's a reason Spamton, a character who speaks
I don't like Spamton. I don't like him too.
Typing quirk blew up in the fandom to the extent he did, unlike any of the characters in Chapter 1. The amount
I don't think he's very funny. I like Jebel more.
Please those kinds of people is more horrifying than
but like, I still don't think he was made to please people. Like,
boring, too predictable and generic, without enough quirky moments or simplified characters with iconic catchphrases to keep their attention. The only exception being Rules Card, whom I've ironically always hated. They find the antagonist boring because he doesn't serve as a joke designed to make the characters do funny and silly things. He's actually serious. It's why they insist it's character development when it was all retracted and he started acting more in line with future antagonists. They find the NPCs boring because they're written to be realistic and believable depictions of the society with their own lives.
What? They find the NPCs boring because they're meant to be a realistic and believable depictions of what do you mean? Did the other chapters NPCs not do that? I don't get it. What is his point?
And don't just exist to be living meme generators. But
what is this guy talking about?
In the preceding chapters. Chapter 3 starts with you waking up in the dark
That's the
world.
same thing. That doesn't change.
1 and 2's opening, except this time it's only used as set dressing for dialogue. Previously, they were used as methods of cultivating mystery or suspense, something
Yes,
Chapter 2 actually
that's
started
also
off
what
with
it
well
is.
until it was ruined
It's
by
also
taking
about
dignity from
cultivating.
character. In Chapter 3, this area serves no narrative purpose or relation to the TV setting. Meanwhile, Chapter 1 and 2 set up the
Well, yeah.
monster and the wires respectively.
But it's
Instead, this
still.
area
You said it doesn't contribute to the mystery, but it does. Like, look at it. It's so mysterious. It has got the dark thing effect around the main character. Like
is
the,
used to give the
it
illusion that
helps
you're
with the
playing a video
mystery.
game, while in reality you're watching characters talk for 15 whole minutes.
15
Susie
minutes.
talks
Dude,
about
how long
much
is
you want-
this? How long is this been? Full gameplay. Like, I'm pretty sure it was like 3 minutes. Maybe if we count the Ralphie cutscene. Let's see. 1 minute, 3 minutes. Okay, about 10 minutes. Yeah. But yeah, I don't think
hang out
it's
with
that
Ralsei in
long.
the real world, making her come off
It
as
really
fat
isn't
and
as long.
dumb. The fact so much time is spent explaining something you've had shoved in your face twice already is insulting. It harms Susie as a character as well, making her appear stupid to the point of frustration.
Well,
I don't
she's
want to keep
stupid,
mentioning
though.
Paper Trail as
She's
an
very
example of
smart,
writing
but-
that isn't terrible, but the comic didn't drag out the revelation for minutes. It gave Susie a mature and dismissive response while leaving the rest up for interpretation. There aren't any bullets to dodge here. Cool. Great. Glad to know areas are becoming even less complex and dangerous with time. There are 2 puzzles that show up, reused from Chapter 1, and somehow they're both even less complicated than their Chapter 1 counterparts.
Yeah, because it's meant. Yeah, that chapter 3 introduction area is only meant to be exposition.
Ralsei
It's
also
really
shows
not
acting
meant to
super
be
depressed about not
very
being a real
gameplay
person, how
focused.
Chris and Susie shouldn't care too much about
It's
him,
just
and how they
something
should find
smooth.
real friends if he's never not enough. Something not set up at all in Chapter 1 or 2, and had to be written around with him saying that sometime in between then and now, he selfishly started feeling sad he couldn't hang out with them in the real world. It's shockingly contrived, also that it can be immediately solved at the end of the chapter with a big speech from Susie about how valuable everyone is. His identity crisis that was given an entire cutscene in Chapter 2 is also never brought up again either. Susie insists that Darkners are real, and their feelings are totally real, something we'll ironically be taught isn't true at all. Chapter 3 is entirely a filler chapter, even though Chapter 2 barely developed the narrative either. But that's not always a bad thing. Filler can still serve an important function in developing the world and characters, otherwise it would actually just be a complete and utter waste of time. Chapter 3 is a filler chapter
What?
meant to serve one
Okay, it
large,
works.
important purpose that's set up at the very start with Ralsei. Chapter 3, unlike what Ralsei says, is meant to show that Darkners are more than just objects, but rather people with feelings just like Lightners. Something Susie tells him in response at the start. So it's very awkward how the entire chapter conveys the exact opposite of that. The characters of Chapter 3 are hollow, boring mockeries of characters in a way the previous chapters, even Chapter 2, never stooped down to. For reasons I'll get into.
Well,
Dreamer's
yeah,
only
they don't
real
have
trait
much
is that he's
dialogue,
sad and
yeah.
angry the Dreamer family doesn't
There are
want
only
him
like
anymore. Get it? Because
a
of the
few
TV. An incredible,
important
boring motive
enemies
that only serves to
that
prove
like
these
have
characters are
real
one-dimensional
personalities.
screenshot generators for the internet and not genuine, multifaceted people like Lightners are. Chapter 1 did this far better with the King, a man who, instead of fighting for the love and attention of Lightners, actively fought against it, proving that Darkners were a separate race with their own thoughts and wants, not just dumb objects meant to fulfill their purpose to please Lightners. The characters and world of Chapter 3 aren't extensively shown to have any history that would prove its existence before the player enters it, aside from a plot point with Spamton having a deal with Tenna that the game mocks as a concept. Chapter 1 did this far better, establishing its storied history of a suit-themed
Yeah, Lalino and El Nina, the two guys. Yeah.
and Jevel's
That's
history
true.
with Seam, resulting in him being trapped in a prison after learning the truth of the Dark World. Chapter 3's world mainly consists of a single room that works as a main hub, and outside of it is a bunch of tight corridors and hallways that linearly filter you to the next area,
Yeah.
interspersed with puzzles that make no sense contextually. Why is this world's architecture filled with
I mean, it
Amazon
makes-
quiz traps and video game puzzles you need to beat to progress? It's not a believable world in the slightest. Chapter 1 handled this far
What?
better. The world
Huh?
was a sprawling,
What?
medieval-themed field with
I don't
puzzles
get it. It's TV
contextualized by
themed.
the puzzle masters, who
It
were
was
literal
always TV
puzzle piece
themed.
people.
What?
The main
Why?
enemies and
Like-
NPCs of Chapter 3 mainly exist to be jokes and not actual people. The most common character being a literal black silhouette that only speaks in saxophone noises. Oh boy, yeah, that's a real person with real feelings, just like Lightner's, and not just an object. Chapter 1 did this far better, with NPCs mostly just existing, living their best lives, and talking about how they go about their days. Enemies would talk about how they're doing it for the guy who pays
He
them.
reused the same
ridiculous
footage.
abstract mini-games like shooting hearts at their socks, but instead far more believable methods of convincing them. Lancer, the typical reoccurring joke character, wasn't just put in the chapter for the sake of pointless jokes, but was more than that. He had familial bonds with the main antagonist and a big role in progressing the narrative. So by some laughable course of events, this chapter's sole message ended up being the polar opposite of what it was meant to be. Tenna's the wacky new boss of the chapter that was spoiled months ahead of time by Toby. Absolutely incredible. So much respect for your story. Tenna is a character by
What is this? My family clarified the was thing. My friend didn't clarify, but same friend who played chapter 3 like over a year ago and told me I missed Dana. Was like, man, there's something ever. Dude, how does that really impact the character? How does it impact the character to you? I don't get it. What changes? That's not even really a spoiler.
For your story. Tenna is a character
What
with
is
the
this
illusion
guy?
of more depth than previous bosses, due to a bunch of meaningless backstory information being told to you that holds no bearing on the overarching plot. Anywhere it could have been taken in the future is immediately thrown out as you hand him to someone else and he never appears again. That, or he straight up mocks you for assuming that it would be delved into at any point and does the funny meme pose while spraying the funny meme character with the funny meme foam. Imagine if Undyne, Papyrus, and Sans were never brought up again after seeing them in Undertale. Congratulations, you just imagined Deltarune. Characters like the King, Queen, and Tenna, despite ending on semi-interesting notes in their respective chapters, don't do anything but say and do quirky, silly things all day in the castle town. It's blatant flanderization of their already simple characters, and a refusal to expand on them past being walking, talking gags. It's blatantly poor writing, and I doubt future chapters will attempt to remedy it. There are allusions to Mike working in the background that end up going nowhere. There are discussions of a
Yes,
previous
that's
partnership
true.
with Spamton that ends
Oh, okay. How?
being made into a joke at your expense, mocking you for thinking that it would ever be relevant. And there's
Okay.
Tenna's one-sided connection with the Dreamer
Yes,
family.
he has
Some
a
people
point
might
with
say
that
this
one.
is important and gives him a lot of intrigue and is directly tied to his motivation, but I disagree with that. Because he acts identically to Queen, who had no relationship with the Dreamer family. They both force you to play minigames, and they both capture you, and they both get sent to the castle town to spout jokes for the end of time.
Brava, okay.
Unless you just give him to Pink Napstablook, in which he disappears forever. While his relationship with the family certainly could have been made into something more substantial, in Chapter 3 it doesn't hold any bearing on the conclusion to Tenna's character arc. Instead of the Dreamer family vowing to watch him more, his main motivation in the entire chapter, you're given the option to hand him off to a random unseen person to do unspecified things with him. So the only differentiating trait his relationship with the Dreamers results in are a bunch of throwaway lines of dialogue referencing their old habits. So after all of that, the only thing he's left with is that he's sad because no one watches him anymore, in a filler chapter whose sole purpose is to show off how the characters are more than just objects. Yikes. At the start of the chapter, Tenna references a grand prize for the Lightners to win. That grand prize obviously being Toriel in her capsule. This was something I immediately predicted and turned out to be true at the end of the chapter. Of course Tenna had Toriel. It was the only way the plot could progress with how much time was wasted not actually searching for her. It only made sense for the grand prize to end up being the party's single, heavily ignored objective. Except throughout the chapter, it's treated as a big, overarching mystery that you're given glimpses of through Susie's interactions with Tenna. He's shown leaving during one of the game boards and talking to a mysterious character off camera, telling them to keep Toriel asleep, while in reality it's actually just Ram trying to find Toriel and keep her comfortable. The amount of different interpretations I've seen of this entire chapter just as a result of this pointless obscurity is baffling. Some people say Tenna had never met
it
the
was
knight
never a
and resolved Chris's
mystery.
plan, which is what I originally believed due to Chris being the one who made the fountain. Some said Tenna was talking with the knight
Yeah,
over the
I guess
phone,
it's
which was
kinda
brilliantly
confusing,
untrue. He was
because
going
even
around
I
the
don't
portals in the
know
capsule
for
for Toriel to
certain
play
who
music to
he
keep her
was
asleep.
talking
But
to,
from what he says
or
at the
like,
end of the chapter, it seems like he was working with the knight to some small extent.
yeah.
If that were the case, it would imply that between the time Chris forms the fountain and wakes up in the Dark World, the knight made it to the Dark World, made a plan with Tenna to find and secure Toriel, as well as stall the Lightners, and at the end, the knight just decides to leave. And because of that, he was too late to retrieve Toriel before Tenna gives her back to Chris. Awesome. It's not an exaggeration to say Tenna was written to be a copy of Spamton in response to his absurd mainstream popularity. Some people will deny that, stating that Topi had the idea for Deltarune for over a decade now.
Yes.
I refute that by mentioning how Queen's design and personality were undecided, and the Shadow Crystals were retconned into the game via a post-launch patch.
I mean, just because you've got an overall idea for something, it doesn't mean you know about. It doesn't mean you've got an idea on every single little thing you want, every single little character you want to add, every single little plot point. That's not how it works.
Shares the exact same typing quirk as Spamton, but with even more quirky and memeable visuals and audio effects. He has the exact same TV-based persona and general speech patterns
I mean,
as Spamton.
no. Spamton was more internet-based. I mean, yeah, there is a difference. Even if it might be a little small, there's still a
The only major
difference.
difference is that, unlike Spamton, Tenna lacks a dark, tragic backstory and motive that's semi-intriguing.
What do you mean? I mean, it's just kind of tragic. Nobody like watches him anymore.
Does super silly and easily gifable dances designed to be reposted, and says funny and random things designed to be reposted, because the humor of this game has devolved into fucking brain rot. I find this kind of humor incredibly insulting and infantilizing for multiple reasons. Spamton was primarily funny when he shouted about living in a, quote, goddamn garbage can and slammed his fist against it just to straighten his tie and convince you to take a deal, because that played into him and his circumstances of being a down-on-his-luck salesman. Not when he said quirky and random things like that's abdominal pain in my guts while having his X scale stretched. It's disappointing they decided to turn the unfunniest, most annoying parts of him into an entire character. I know some people will argue humor is subjective
What is it? Bro,
for this point, while simultaneously arguing that
show
jokes about
this.
Noel getting raped in Snowgrave are unacceptable. But just because
Oh, wait, he brought it up. He just brought it up.
simultaneously arguing that jokes about Noel getting raped in Snowgrave are unacceptable.
He just brought it up. Bro, you shouldn't bring that up. God. He's going against himself. He's literally fighting against himself. What the hell? Bro is helping the haters.
Because some people are retarded enough to find this kind of writing funny
Bro, dude, don't say that word. Don't say that word into Deltarune community.
Age of 10 doesn't mean it isn't poorly executed or that it couldn't have been better. It seems irrefutably likely that his visual design was also heavily altered as well to make him more appealing to the fandom. The sinister smile seen on the TV at the end of Chapter 2 that was clearly implied to be him was turned into a hidden Easter egg. Instead, his design features a big white nose and mouth that overtakes his entire face, just like Spamton. Tenna's design uses a different art style, and instead of it just being a cute, small little detail, it's used as a crutch for making him memorable and funny. This is a style of quote-unquote comedy Earthbound, Undertale, and even Deltarune until this point never lowered to before because it's lazy. It lacks a clever setup or punchline. It relies entirely on being ridiculous and random, constantly downplaying any and all stakes, just like the Marvel writing everyone despises. I don't know how Queen, a character based on the internet and computers, relies more on old-fashioned banter and doesn't use wacky meme humor as much as an old TV host. Queen mostly relied on insulting and demeaning the protagonists in creative ways. In comparison, almost all of Tenna's hilarious jokes are just him doing an over-exaggerated reaction or the silly dance. Earthbound, this game's inspiration relied on its funny, but most importantly, clever dialogue. This is not clever. It's the equivalent of peekaboo with a child, shocking them with a strange face meant to get a reaction. The comedy of an Earthbound-like stems from the humor of the mundane, something Chapter 1 of Deltarune nailed. Susie would be dumbfounded by Lancer's naivety. Lancer would try to impress her in childish ways. Susie would defend her behavior in exceedingly roundabout ways, and party members would get embarrassed by messing up acts. It was funny, not because it was inane, but because it had a level of realism and occasional cynicism to it that was relatable, just like its
I guess it's
inspiration
right with
Earthbound.
this one.
Basically, it did not turn Rousey into a marketable plushie or have the main antagonist spontaneously dance for no reason.
Yeah, I think the
Queen
humor
was
has
occasionally
definitely
funny, not
changed
because she
over
did the
time.
wacky GIF reaction, but
And
because
also
she had snarky
Deltarune's
dialogue that
overall
played off of the rest of the cast.
direction
Something proven
is
by the
definitely
fact Tenna
different.
can
Chapter
actually
5,
be funny
Chapter 1
sometimes. He does have a few
definitely
funny
tried to
lines
do
of
different
dialogue
things,
that play into
which
him being
then weren't
intended to be an
expanded,
old TV
really
host and not
expanded
just a
upon in future chapters.
But unfortunately,
That's
moments
true.
like that are the exception and not the rule. Such as when he asks
But
Mike
still,
to get him a
Chapter
cup
1
of
is kinda
coffee
boring,
and rebuild his
honestly.
kids after tearing everything down. Tenna lacks a single memorable main theme like Queen had in Chapter 2. Its wise boss theme is a total mess, trying to juggle 4 different leitmotifs instead of putting more emphasis on a single one. It's not as clever as Queen's theme mixed with Birdley's theme, and certainly not as
Yeah, that's
clever as
true,
the
but he has
Kingstar-
got his how was it called? Tenna's Team. Tenna's Team. The basic one, not this one. The one in his introduction. No, not this one. How is it called? The one where when he appears. We're gonna go on Spotify. Deltarune. Yes, today's sponsor. Deltarune. Yeah, I guess it's this one. Yeah, this is this team. I really don't get what like what kind of criticism is this? It's kind of weird.
Her take on Lancer's theme combined with his
Yeah,
very
I
passive
honestly
motif.
like Queen's
If all
team
the
and
people asking me
the
for the
King's
fan song
team
I used
more
during his
than
segment was
Tenna's,
anything
but
to go
still,
by,
it's not
the songs
bad.
used for him are generally unimpressive. All of this culminates in what is the absolute worst character in Deltarune, a character that combines every one of Deltarune's worst aspects into a single, easily marketable character. It's pointless information designed to contrive meaningless discussion to sustain the game's popularity. It's shallow, simple characters defined more by their typing quirks and memes more than their actual personality or relevance to the plot. It's irony-ridden, fan-pandering dialogue designed to be as marketable and popular as possible, and its inability to be serious or have any respect for its own story. And it's no wonder Deltarune fans absolutely fucking obsess over him. When the Green Room was shown off in the ARG, little did we know we had the entirety of Chapter 3 spoiled to us. Instead of actually using the setting of the world we're in, like Chapter 1 and 2, Chapter 3 is spent inside one room, occasionally doing minigames that were originally based on the chapter's now-cut content. Boy oh boy, do I love the idea of a Deltarune chapter centered entirely around minigames, because if there's one thing I hate about Deltarune, it's its core RPG bullet hell mechanics the game is built and marketed around. Now, call me crazy, but what if instead of the entire chapter taking place in a single room, you explored a world based on television? Crazy,
I mean-
I know. Like, and I know this is a stretch, maybe a weather-themed channel area.
Wait,
for
he's a Glazing Vision crew. Oh my god.
The weather
I don't
team
know.
channel.
I can't tell if this guy. Like, is this guy into Deltarune community or something? Because it seems to know a lot about it. But then, why would you be in a community of a game you absolutely hate? I don't get it. Like,
Mini
what?
boss.
What?
You spend more than half of the
Get it.
chapter in
But
desert-themed
this guy-
8-bit levels
A
inspired by
hater,
Zelda
or is he
without the
actually
unique
like
items,
a fan and
progression,
follower?
combat, dungeons, level design, music, enemy variety, puzzles, oh my god. Zelda-like minigames that even Toby himself thought weren't fun because the last one, despite being fully developed, was cut from the final game.
Yeah, this video,
entire
I think
chapter
it's a bit
suffers from
too long to
crippling
be
lack of
rage bait
direction,
though.
likely as a result of each area being made independently. When people heard they cut the cowboy segment, they thought it was intentional foreshadowing, because why the hell would they advertise an entire segment just to cut it in a game that has supposedly been planned since 2011? In a classic Deltarune subversion of expectations, it really was just complete incompetence. One thing has become apparent after my first video, that Deltarune fans love and obsess over Deltarune for literally everything but its actual gameplay. You'll hear them make theories analyzing images that
This
appear
is a
once,
valid
file
criticism,
names,
but
hidden
it's not
dialogue in its
worth
JSON
the
file,
actual
and
game.
explicitly non-canon material. But you'll never hear a Deltarune fan talk about, be it positively or negatively, the bullet patterns of enemies, the depth and strategy behind combat, or the enemy variety.
I talk about that. Dude, I talk about that though. I am the exception. I'm the exception.
Or evolve on its core RPG-based bullet hell battle system.
One of my absolute favorite parts of Toby Fox's approach to game design is how he constantly switches it up.
Instead, adding a bunch of disconnected mechanics and mini-games that are just as quickly introduced as they are thrown away. Sneaking, a mechanic commonplace in games and ripe with potential, was wholly uninteresting in the chapter it was introduced. Instead of sneaking past security guards, you move faster and dodge objects. Absolutely riveting. When has the game ever done that before? Climbing actually has a lot of potential. It allows for more varied set pieces and difficult to traverse terrain. It would be especially well utilized if you were actually able to revisit old Dark Worlds with your new abilities, much like the RPGs Deltarune is inspired by. However, if the complete removal of previous ideas like new party members, spells, the targeting system, Dark Worlds that actually match their real-world counterparts, and all of the minigames, thank God, it's incredibly unlikely they'll ever appear again. Deltarune fans praise and enjoy this because they hate video games. It's why they vehemently despise 60 FPS and plead for the game to stay 30. They use Deltarune for content, to make art, music, and theory videos for attention. They use Deltarune to feel like they're in a community, not as a video game. Gameplay
many people do that. That is true.
I like Undertale and Deltarune's battle system, and was excited to see how it would develop in future chapters to be more complex and difficult. More spells that would give use to TP, more armor and weapons with varying strengths and weaknesses, and more party members that could fit a more offensive or defensive playstyle. Basically, an RPG inspired by Earthbound. Instead of that, we got a bunch of mechanically disconnected minigames. This is why the chapter took so long to make, and it absolutely wasn't worth it by any metric. If Deltarune had instead chosen to stick to the smaller, more reserved scale of Chapter 1, focusing its development time on its battles, and not entirely new features that have to be made from scratch, the game would be a lot more cohesive and actually finished before its decade anniversary. In place of an actual overworld with high-quality pixel art, artistically varied set pieces, and thematically appropriate enemies and music, you're instead forced to play a Zelda-inspired minigame with the same low-effort, low-quality 8-bit sprites in a generic desert setting that was probably based on cut content. Zelda games are some of the greatest games ever designed for multiple reasons this minigame completely fails to capture, no pun intended. There's the intricate combat system with its use of items like bombs and the boomerang. It's challenging
the combat
puzzles
system is
spanning across
simply
multiple
Deltarune's basic combat.
Item-based progression that alters how you perceive and interact with the world. 15 plus hours of that stuff crammed onto a 1 megabyte cartridge on a Game Boy. Deltarune refuses to replicate Zelda's depth in that way, instead relying on the main party giving a bunch of vapid commentary that makes them come off as obnoxiously dense and unconcerned.
I mean, that's the whole point of the chapter. It wouldn't be... Then it will be a completely different thing. This chapter is all about developing the main party's relationship, right? I'm pretty sure that was the whole point of the chapter.
Character
and why they play mini games.
Shown to care about. For all we know, she's being raped in Tenna's secret BDSM dungeon, and we're
Dude, stop making rape jokes. Stop.
Works to make Ralsei and Susie incredibly unlikable, maliciously apathetic about
stop making
Toriel
rape jokes. Holy crap.
Tenna, despite the fate of the world being at stake. The closest Deltarune comes to replicating Zelda's items is a camera you're freely given from the start, an item that also existed in Zelda as a fun side mechanic and not a useful item for progression. It's just not all that interesting when the only item used for progression isn't thought-provoking to strategize around, but just has you select something and change it. You do get Susie a power bracelet, but you aren't even allowed to use it yourself outside of a short joke segment, making it a croissant-shaped key for a pot-shaped door. As a fan of Zelda, this segment is especially insulting to me personally because it's a mockery of its gameplay for a fandom that will never engage with its inspiration. The Snowgrave version of this mini-game, while better due to actually forcing you to engage in combat, is
Yeah,
still
that's true.
mechanically
It's better
shallow and
in
tedious. The
in
overworld lacks puzzles, items, or any
gameplay
area
wise. It's
progression
better.
outside of opening a path after you finally defeat all of the enemies. Any tension that combat could have is immediately revoked by the game dropping a downright excessive amount of health pickups when you're at low HP. Is it just because... Oh, fuck. Okay, that's nice, you feel. It's like the guys in Mario 2. Ooh. The creepypasta stuff, such as breaking the game and going out of bounds to find scary stuff and kill everyone, was cliché and played out even when the chapter first released. It isn't executed all that well in comparison to other games like Inscription, but I suppose it could be worse. This entire segment is a blatant reference to the beginning of Link's Awakening, where Link has to find his sword, and as a massive fan of that game, I actually find this incredibly distasteful. The beginning of Link's Awakening had puzzles. It had exploration of terrain with depth, ledges to jump off of, and branching paths to discover. It gave you a shield to push enemies out of the way and make you play more defensively, to make it so when you get your sword,
it
was
doesn't
far
have
more
that much,
rewarding.
but
The
I
Zelda
don't think it
section in
really has
Deltarune
to.
lacks all of that. There are no puzzles, you aren't given any tools like the shield, and the map for each
Because
area is
that's
a
not what the
glorified
point of
square.
it is.
Graphically, the game
The
is
whole
more
point
similar
is
to the first
the
Zelda game
weird
on
route,
NES,
so it
the way
doesn't.
Chris Lynx's sword is
That's
directly
not
taken
really
from the
meant to
NES
be
game, not Link's Awakening. I doubt
like
this section is
Zelda.
meant to be a reference to the first Zelda game, though, because Toby Fox has specifically mentioned Link's Awakening as an inspiration in the past. The Ice Palace also has music so similar to a song in Link's Awakening that it borders on straight-up theft. The haphazard combination of the two entirely different games makes this segment feel more like it was generated by AI than someone actually invested in the series. There also isn't any music while Chris is unarmed, instead relying on ambient sounds. The overworld music that plays when Link is unarmed is a beautiful track that has stood the test
Stop
of time, and
comparing
Deltarune
it!
didn't even
Holy
make
crap!
an attempt at replicating
Stop comparing
The
it.
events of
They're
these
two
secret
different
minigames
games.
serve no other purpose than
Trying to do
parallel
two
the
completely
Snowgrave
different
route.
things.
While on the
Holy
surface
crap!
is certainly a cool observation,
Stop
nothing you
comparing
see play out
them.
in the minigame is indicative
Why are you so
of anything new,
fixated on
making
that?
it entirely a waste of time. You attack a bunch of creatures, abuse someone in a white robe who casts ice magic, and freeze a bluebird to progress. If it was meant to be a hint towards the route for new players, then I have to question why it was locked behind getting a good rank at the minigames. Some of the choices you have to make in the Snowgrave route are also incredibly convoluted and aren't implied at all by the NES game. Last time I checked, you don't achieve the Snowgrave route in Chapter 3 by discovering an ice key by going out of bounds, entering a hidden dungeon, and hitting Noelle with your sword. There's certainly some other stuff that happens, like entering the bunker for a boss fight against a creature suspiciously similar to the knight. However, it's too vague to be construed as anything other than the bunker has significance, which was pretty obvious. There's also the implication that
it's meant to be like a prediction for the ending of the game, of what will happen in the bunker.
you'll use
It's
up
not that
Chris
the
and move
bunker has
on from him.
significance.
I'd
That
like
was
it if this
clear, but
implied
like,
you'd move on to a more powerful
oh my
host.
God.
That would be pretty awesome. But if I had to guess, it's probably just a reference to how the player will be.
Dude,
finished
I
with
sort
Chris
of
by the
had
end of Deltarune.
some.
The only
I
unmistakable
had decent
implication during the
expectations for
NES
this
game is
video.
when you use Chris to kill Susie and Rousey to level up. While I enjoyed the detail of Chris flinching, this is absolutely just a pathetic attempt at shock value and not an omen for things to come. It is ridiculous to believe otherwise. This is the same game that brought back Tenna after he had both of his arms
ridiculous.
chopped
How
clean
is it?
off. This is the same
Did
game
you
that
like
refused to kill
see
Burgley
chapter
after
4
an entire
ending?
chapter
That was
building up
not.
to his murder. The same
Oh
game
my
whose only
God.
substantial change
You
made to
see
the
chapter
story
4
after
ending.
freezing
Wasn't
your
that
classmate
devious?
in ice
What
was a
are you
3-minute long
talking
talk
about?
with
What
a friend. And I'm being told to
what
expect
are
that
you
will kill the
talking
two
about?
main
What?
protagonists. Don't get me wrong, that would be a shocking twist. It's just not
Yeah?
going to happen.
What do
If I
you mean it's just not going to happen? What do you mean? What? Oh my
had more
God.
faith in
Dude.
Deltarune as a
Yeah,
cohesive narrative. I'm
Fox,
sure I'd
how do
find
you
the
know if that's going
implications
to
of some
happen
of
or
these scenes
not?
riveting, but if the length of this video is anything to go by, I clearly don't, and for good reason. Unless you're deeply invested in analyzing every facet of Deltarune for clues, the length and tedium of this entire segment is not justified. The Ice Dungeon was an area foreshadowed and developed incredibly well in the ARG, a mysterious dungeon that Noelle was only able to find the exit to once, but was too scared to continue and turn the game off. An absolutely awesome setting that I would have loved to see expanded on in-game in a creepy segment similarly to Spamton's Basement. Instead, it was turned into 8-bit set dressing with the exact same gameplay loop and level design as the previous areas. It only serves as a path to an 8-bit depiction of the bunker, despite being
no,
a
the level
completely
design is
unrelated
different.
setting. A horrible
What is he
use of the
talking about?
setup of the
The
ARG
level
that made
design
it
is
sound far
completely
more
different.
important than it was. A unique, well-foreshadowed setting with a relationship to one of the main cast and a creepy atmosphere wasted on nothing. To praise one thing about this segment though, the moment where you walk onto the screen and grab the chest that's out of reach is an incredible moment. A great, creepy subversion that really makes you think about the mechanics of the world and how they really work, compounded with a great moment
Yeah, that's
where
a
the
great
player takes
moment.
control of 8-bit Chris in place of
The only
real
moment,
Chris, and you're
the
allowed
only
to
part
slash
where
at Chris
he's
to
actually
assert
right
control
is
in
when he's
complete disregard
glazing
for
the
his
game.
well-being, just like Noelle. You're even allowed to come back and attack Susie for blatant shipping bait I don't care about. This moment clearly separates 8-bit Chris as a conscious entity from Chris himself, and even the player with his autonomy to leave on his own. An incredibly intriguing prospect, how would a simplified Dark World replica of a Lightner from the prophecy built upon the foundation of the Snowgrave route act? Questions that will never be answered because after this moment he never shows up again. Personally, I was hoping he'd be a secret boss with a ram, but this chapter, for reasons I'll get into later, doesn't have one. The boss of this segment,
That's the
E-Ram,
secret
is
boss.
tolerable. It's still not on par with the depth of the actual battle system, but it's still more mechanically resemblant to it than the other minigames. I actually like the difficulty in a few of the bullet patterns, despite a lot of them being highly luck-based, especially when E-Ram flies around. However, this is when the healing item drops become unabashedly bad design. This boss fight is meant to be a difficult roadblock with a powerful reward, and yet it spawns enemies that drop an excessive amount of easily retrievable healing items right next to you. The more you die to E-Ram, the more health item drops will spawn. This is reverse game design. What other
How
game
is
in
that
the entire
reverse game
world
design?
rewards you for dying to a boss meant to be a difficult roadblock to overcome with an excessive amount of easily retrievable health pickups that let you mindlessly tank attacks? Typically, HP and healing items that restore HP are a valuable resource that you want to avoid expending, not completely free. A boss that would otherwise be fine, ruined by this game's unwillingness to create an actual challenge that might force players to get better at the game. Some people say the Shadow Mantle is a necessary item for the night fight, and they're absolutely wrong. The night fight is easily beatable without it. If anything, it makes the fight far too easy and the night look far too weak. Still, an item with an elemental resistance is cool in a game that typically remains very mechanically shallow. The other minigames are even less in depth. The chef cooking minigame is mediocre due to the only punishment for getting hit
Yeah, I
being
agree
a
with the
lower
healing thing
score.
as well.
There's at least some element of risk and reward. The more food you stack, the harder it is to move, but the more points you get. It's fine, but it's not what I'm playing an RPG for. Also, the pixels on Susie's sprite are laughably bad. The next major minigame is a rhythm game with the lowest amount of buttons I've ever seen. For comparison, Night in the Woods had a rhythm game that served an important narrative purpose, giving history to the characters, had 4 whole buttons, and far more difficult music to play. The Susie Zilla minigame ended up being made into an unlockable secret due to the board it was tied to being cut from the final game. Very ironic, considering it clearly has the most effort put into it. The Western Shootout minigame turns Rousey into a horse with a suit you can buy right now for the Rousey plushie for $24? It's disturbing and blatantly ignores the rules of the world, letting him transform into a different creature for the sake of a joke that doesn't land. These minigames are not hard to win, and it's not hard to get an S or even T rank from them if you've played another game before. However, locking the only true narrative content behind a bunch of mechanically incoherent and disconnected minigames with no relation to Deltarune's core RPG bullet hell gameplay is fucking stupid. You're not getting better at Deltarune from these minigames. That would actually be fun. Instead, you're getting better at a bunch of minigames that you'll only ever play once. It's the equivalent of Super Mario Bros. Locking its secret world behind beating 10 levels of Dig Dug. This is all just an example of Deltarune being embarrassed of being a video game and doing everything it can not to make its players bored from, God forbid, playing an RPG. Gee, this minigame compilation sure is boring. My boy, this is what all true Deltarune fans strive for. What? The most shocking part of Chapter 2 was when Noelle joined Chris as a party member. I'm sure if you were to ask everyone at the time, they would have said it was their favorite new mechanic added to the game. It was an extra amount of effort no one expected, that expanded on the battle system with a new party member, and a new spell with a unique mechanic that affected the
Yeah, I'm
story.
kinda
It was
disappointed,
not insane to expect future chapters to do the same thing with characters like
Yeah, I'm
Toriel,
pretty
Caddy, and
disappointed other
Jacqueline.
chapters didn't
Characters
have
already shown
new
to be
characters
distinct from
joining
other
your
classmates by
party.
having face sprites drawn for them. In fact, it would be an incredible example of showing story progress through gameplay. As you progress into the game, you'd amass an entire group of light warriors that would all team up to fight off the looming threat of the Roaring. It would give more of a gameplay impact to the
Yeah,
story
finally a
as
good
well,
point.
reducing your party options and forcing you to focus on a smaller cast of stronger party members. If you think this is too much work to implement, RPGs have been doing this since their inception, with a major example being Final Fantasy, but a more apt comparison being Mother 3 and its constantly rotating main cast of party members. This was actually one of the main reasons I liked Birdley as a character. He had an incredible character design and a cocky personality that I would have loved to force interact with the rest of the main cast. I'm not saying I'm mad because the game didn't implement my specific idea. I'm saying all of this to showcase how easy it would have been for the game to naturally develop its RPG-based roots and mechanics, and how, in comparison, the actual final game insists on doing the absolute bare minimum even when compared to previous chapters of the game. Despite Deltarune being labeled as an RPG and being inspired by one of the most influential RPGs ever made, the game desperately doesn't want to be an RPG. Instead, Deltarune has chosen to heavily focus on programming in a bunch of entirely new gimmicks that distract from the game's actual battle system, such as sneaking, climbing, minigames, more minigames, but now in battle, and escaping darkness in the overworld. And if anything, since its inception, Deltarune has actually devolved mechanically and strategically. All of the main party members' unique roles have been completely gutted from them. In Chapter 2, everyone was granted the ability
He's
to
going
act when
to
originally it was Chris's only
talk
strength.
about
In
how
Chapter
Suzy
4,
can
Suzy was
heal
granted
now.
the ability to
Yep.
actually start healing well,
Yep.
when originally it was Ralsei's only strength. Because apparently party members having unique strengths and weaknesses that give them a unique, impactful role in the party
I mean, I
is
don't
a
think
bad
that's
thing that needs to be
necessarily a
toned
bad
down,
a
and the
bad
character
thing.
arc
I
is
think it's
explaining how it confines them
I think
from
it's
achieving
pretty
their
good
true
to show like
aspirations, and it really
Suzy's
hurts their
development,
feelings. I would
and
not
also most people. I'm pretty sure most people still use Suzy to attack instead of heal. Like it's sort of convenient, and also the TP. You need like how much TP? Like 80 TP to use Suzy's heal, so it's not worth it. Like,
not be shocked
this
if
is
in
really
Chapter 5,
isn't that
Ralsei will
important.
obtain a high
I
damage
think it was
spell to use
implemented
against
well.
dark enemies, but Deltarune insists on treating everything that reduces HP as evil despite the implications of Chapter 1, so it seems unlikely. Characters having defined roles and strengths is important for strategy in an RPG. Originally, in Chapter 1, if Chris went down, it meant you couldn't act or spare enemies unless you resorted to spending TP on Ralsei's Pacify spell. If Suzy went down, it meant you lost your tank who could soak up and dish out the most damage. If Ralsei went down, it meant you wouldn't be able to heal using TP and instead had to wait for them to naturally regenerate over a few turns or use your limited, expensive healing items. In comparison, in Chapter 4, if Chris, Suzy, or Ralsei go down, it doesn't matter because the other party members can serve the exact same purpose they can, and in some cases, even better. I absolutely love RPGs and I absolutely love Deltarune's combat system, but unfortunately we'll never get a game with Deltarune's combat system because the actual game insists on keeping it as mechanically dull and simple as possible, exemplified by the refusal to give any characters any new unique spells even though the game is over halfway finished. Deltarune insists on expanding horizontally instead of
I mean, I'm
vertically,
pretty sure
instead of
with
developing what's already
new
programmed
weapons
in,
and
such as
armors,
party
you
members,
can use new
role
spells.
patterns, action commands, equipment, and abilities. It instead creates entirely new gimmicks from scratch, such as a glowing soul mechanic, a bunch of minigames, versions of the soul colors from Undertale, and unique minigames for Axe. Stuff that wouldn't be bad on their own if it wasn't done at the expense
it's
of
just
the game's
for
core
Axe.
gameplay. It's undoubtedly one
I
of the
really don't
reasons the
get
game
it.
has been in
I
development
don't
for
think
over
it's
a decade
bad.
now, because I guess Deltarune fans would find an actual RPG too boring. If Deltarune ditched all of the gimmicks and stuck to making more fights like the Knight, I would have made a How Chapter 2 Perfected Deltarune video instead. Just as some examples, Chris's acting could have been expanded on by having it impact how an enemy fights during combat instead of just increasing a spare meter, such as altering a bullet pattern to be easier, lowering an enemy's guard to make them more susceptible to attacks, or temporarily
the thing
taking them
about
out of a fight
making
to make it easier for other other party
I
members
guess
to
it
finish
kind
the
of
rest of the enemies
never
off.
mind.
Ralsei could learn some buffing spells that, at the cost of TP, increase attack or defense, allowing you to either make up for a party member's weaknesses or accentuate their strengths. Susie could get a taunt spell that makes her the target of enemy attacks, letting her soak up the brunt of the damage in place of Chris or Ralsei.
I mean, yeah,
All
I
stuff
think
that
it
would have
could
made battles
work.
more in-depth from Chapter 1 scaled with your level,
It
and in some cases
disconnected.
were even better than what you could find in the cyber world. It was a genius inclusion that encouraged you to get better at combat in order to hold on
Huh. I don't know why this happened. Alright.
to
Okay.
the healing items instead of wasting them in battle. This mechanic is almost entirely removed in Chapter 3 and 4, with some items like the club sandwich sticking to restoring 70 HP. It's a complete removal of the emphasis on resource management that has been a staple of RPGs ever since the tabletop days. Experience points don't exist in Deltarune either. A game like Sticker Star is lambasted for its complete lack of EXP or level ups in its RPG battle system, but Deltarune doing the exact same thing is completely overlooked. In Chapter 2, it seemed like the alternative to EXP was having your maximum HP increase, but by the end of the chapter, your HP resets back to normal, removing the only motive to attacking Darkners in Dark Worlds, that being getting stronger. It seemed slightly
I mean, the
implied
whole
that
motive
the
is also just to win the fight. Simply winning the fight. And I mean, Deltarune doesn't really need an XP system. I don't think it would even really work. It wouldn't really
was
add
about
much,
getting
in my
stronger
opinion.
at the cost of the people around you for the sake of control. However, very ironically, the Snowgrave route ends up making you
Like, I'm
weaker
willing to
because
overlook
stat
that.
boosts aren't carried over into future chapters, and you lose access to the best shops and the respective items in the game, meaning a route all about getting stronger makes you weaker. This is the equivalent of Undertale resetting your level back to 1 after killing Toriel and exiting the ruins, when the main motivator was the higher levels and the stat increases that made the game easier. I'm not saying level of violence, it's stupid.
Well, yeah, but Weird Root really isn't about
wanting to get stronger, it's now about the player
like, it's about changing the game. It's really not about getting stronger. That's what it was.
Now what about the acting
That's what the
side of
game
battles?
tells.
In Undertale, you could
it
argue
is.
the mechanical simplicity was done to focus on the enemies and their personalities.
Yep.
Fighting in Undertale was easy but boring in order to filter you towards acting and hence interacting with
Yeah,
the
it's
enemies,
like
the
it's a
main focus of
punishment.
the game. Deltarune, while it started out strong in this regard, has entirely failed at it post-Chapter 1. Acting in Deltarune has become the easier, quicker alternative to choosing fight and gives you the good ending to each chapter. This is the exact opposite of how it functioned in Undertale. In Undertale, acting was purposefully obtuse and confusing, because acting was never meant to be a simple game mechanic where you affected a differently colored bar. That was the very system it was avoiding. Acting was meant to develop the monsters as living creatures with their own lives, thoughts, and interests. Deltarune post-Chapter 1 does an awful job developing and portraying its enemies as people. A lot of them can be boiled down to one simple character trait only used to make jokes, such as speaking in saxophone noises.
I mean, Undertale, most Undertale characters, most Undertale monsters really didn't have more than one personality trait, because it would be like really hard to give them one without spending too much time with them.
Acting is supposed to help with this by forcing
Yeah, I think Snowdrake is probably one of the better developed monsters. He has got a lot of personal lore with his dad, etc., and a lot of interactions revolving around him. But like most monsters in Undertale, they don't have that much. They have like a few lines and like one single defining personality trait. Seriously.
An enemy based on their personality. However, Deltarune now gamifies acting to the point it completely loses that element. No longer do you have to guess what will make a monster happy based on their personality, design, or setting. Unlike Undertale, how each act will affect a monster is directly told to you in no uncertain terms in the menu, turning Darkners into roadblocks with a clearly stated, consistent, and repeatable solution, not characters. The new description for the check command is a brazen example of this, directly stating that it's useless analysis. The check command should not be useless analysis, it should be a method of examining a character for advice on acting, you know, similarly to what Undertale did. Chapter 1 didn't suffer from this. Acts didn't tell you what they'd do, in some cases they weren't effective at all. Enemies had more multifaceted personalities for the most part, such as the diamond guys only being committed to who pays them and easily
this is kind of true.
The stronger diamond guys being more steadfast in their motivation and requiring you to complement them with other party members instead. Some enemies are also given
EX
unique minigames you have to
definitely
do when
have
acting
less
with them. In
personality
absolutely
now,
baffling addition,
and they
it
show
completely
more.
removes an
They show
illusion
less
of
and
convincing
less
them or
of the
talking to
character
them,
you're acting
entirely
upon. Yeah.
replacing it with a simple game you have to beat to make them happy. So Deltarune's combat, be it pacifist or genocide, is worse than it ever used to be. The weather couple were heavily emphasized in the ARG, and I expected the game to treat them as well as Birdly with a unique mini-boss in original song. Instead,
Yeah?
they get a reused
Oh
track
no, the
that's
song
just a
isn't
muddy-sounding
original.
remix of Rude Buster that gets reused again for a normal enemy. While the underlying melody of it is pretty good, the instrumentation is sloppy and harms the clarity. All it took was one guy using the Genesis sound font instead to make it sound infinitely better, and that's coming from a guy who hates Sonic.
Yeah, it's kind of muddy, but still, I think it's a very good track. But why? Never mind. Seriously, I can't tell if this guy is really active into the Deltarune community or not. Because, like, why would you be so active in a fan base of a game you don't even like? Like, he's so weird.
The original version has far worse audio mixing, resulting in each instrument being lost in a cacophony of noise, whereas the Genesis version does a fantastic job making every instrument clearly stand out. It's an issue that permeates throughout the entire soundtrack with only a few exceptions. I like their designs, even if a moon doesn't convey weather at all. A failure on Toby's direction for sure.
What do
But
you
I
mean
guess
a
he
moon
didn't
doesn't
want to police
convey?
the same guy who made the furry idol of Chapter 2 that sustained its
I
relevancy
mean, it does
for 4
convey it a
years.
little bit.
Chapter 1, 2, and
Like
3
Timon,
all follow a formula of a reoccurring mini-boss with a unique song. In Chapter 1, it was Lancer and
Timon is
K-Round.
cool,
In
like,
Chapter 2, it was Birdly. And in Chapter 3,
I don't know,
it was
man.
the
I
Weather
think the
Guys.
designs are
Except
fine.
Chapter 3
I think they're
handles
fitting
this
as well.
formula the
Like,
worst out of all of them. They only have a single bullet pattern that gets repeated with incredibly minor alterations, unlike Lancer and Birdly, which each had far more and continued to develop each encounter. They don't have an original overworld theme or battle theme, unlike Lancer and Birdly, who each got 3 unique themes in the OST. Their second fight doesn't develop their attacks at all, but is instead a joke centered around rules returning and completely overshadows the weather couples as characters. And most bafflingly of
I mean,
all,
that's
they aren't
not
given a
really
Weather
true.
Channel themed
It's
area
about
to
your
fight you in,
dynamic, it's
instead
about
being
a
thrown into an
relationship,
8-bit
and them
minigame with
coming
no
to
thematical
together.
significance.
What do you
I'm not
mean?
saying Deltarune had to stick to a formula. In fact, I was fine with the way Chapter 4 handled it, but Chapter 3 did stick to it, and it executed it far worse than before. It's pure laziness, likely as a result of wanting to resort to the safety of reusing older, already established characters. But I guess Rules pulling out a laser pointer was just so ball-bustingly funny to some people they don't give a shit. Chapter 2 allocated a 10-minute segment developing a mechanic of the Dark World where Darkners that do not belong will turn to stone. An abundantly clear excuse for why Darkners from previous chapters wouldn't return in newer Dark Worlds, with enough leeway to maybe allow important character development from characters like the Queen or King. After all, each chapter should focus on their respective new characters and settings instead of relying
So
on
far,
previously
this video
established
is
characters
like
written for entirely
one
different
good
settings.
take
Lancer is a great example of
among
this. Lancer in
like
Chapter 1
20
was a great
horrible
character
takes.
because he held massive personal stakes in the plot. He was the son of a tyrannical king becoming friends with the enemy. It gave depth to Darkners beyond just Ralsei. His jokes weren't out-of-place random gags for the sake of inserting humor where it didn't belong. They served the purpose of lowering Susie's guard and making when he betrays her for his father sting even more. Now, unsurprisingly, because of this, when he's brought back for 2 chapters with no plot significance except for making a bunch of pointless gags, he sucks. Credit to Chapter 2, it at least kept him away in a menu for those who did care and gave him a clever use by setting you free in the dungeon. In Chapter 3, all he does is dig a hole in a minigame and spin around, a blatant flanderization and bastardization of his character for the sake of appealing to fans who liked him in the previous chapters, even though everything that made him likable in the previous chapters is no longer relevant. Rules is the same, a character who served a purpose in Chapter 1's narrative and had already grown incredibly tiresome by Chapter 2.
Oh well,
And
maybe
yet
a
he
little
returns
bit,
in
I
Chapter
guess.
3 and
With
completely
Lancer.
overshadows the original characters of the chapter by forcing himself into their relationship, making himself the main focus of a joke battle with a completely new gimmick that serves no purpose outside of being different for the sake of it. A complete waste of development time. I will be abundantly clear once again, because despite my efforts in the first video to be as clear as possible, people still misunderstood it somehow. My issue is not that there's a plot hole, because they are still shown to turn to stone. It's that a mechanic was established as a reason for these characters not to return in order to focus on the newer ones, and it was ignored so that the chapter could rely on safe, pre-established characters to tell jokes, despite having none of the narrative significance that made them work so well in the first place. A blatant attempt at appealing to fans at the cost of the chapter's identity and writing. I really like Ram. He's the only character in Chapter 3 I like and would love to see return, because he's shown to have complex motives, depth to his actions with how he goes behind Tenna's back in his job, all to support Chris, who he believes wants to have some real fun. An incredibly clever parallel to what he was used for in the Light World, a power strip taken from the library by Chris and Azriel to play video games. It's a genius use of the object he's based on that doesn't entirely overshadow his actual personality like it does for Tenna, who just wants to be watched. Ram introduces himself as someone Chris used to know, immediately creating intrigue and dissonance between the player and Chris's knowledge. He has a cool design with some sweet facial hair and a unique accent. He plays around the freedom motif in a unique way, giving Chris access to the real game where you decide what to do and have some real fun. Which is why it's so confusing to me when people so exasperatingly state that freedom is such a tired theme after Chapter 2 and they're grateful it was changed. He's shown to be suspiciously selfless through his actions, entirely different from Jevil and Spamton, in a way that's especially tragic near the end when you see him half turned to stone. And it's creepy when he suddenly disappears. It's all done without being spelled out to the audience, and it's all the better for it. And of course, some people really hate him because all they got from his dialogue was that he was a guy who shouts freedom, freedom, freedom to pander to the fans. Chapter 3 shares the exact same plot structure, beat for beat, as the previous chapters. Enter the dark world in a dark and creepy area, get introduced to the main antagonist of the chapter, eventually get captured by them, and then escape their base of operations. Last time I had people going,
yeah, I think Rambo should have
when it doesn't follow
been
it's bad, but
Captain
when it does follow a
Castletown.
formula, it's
That
also
would have
bad,
been really
except in an even
interesting.
more vague and
Because I
obnoxious
like him.
way.
He's a
That
good
makes me
character.
believe they have absolutely no concept of context. It would explain a lot about their behavior, actually. The game repeating the exact same plot progression of entering a dark world, encountering the main bad guy, getting captured, and escaping is poor design.
I don't like how he uses memes.
And hence boring. The game reusing the formula of having a secret boss each chapter with its own music and bullet patterns is just the gameplay of an RPG. The formula of a secret boss each chapter may be predictable, but expecting each chapter of an RPG to have a boss battle isn't the same as each chapter of a story playing out the exact same way. All of this culminates in, give it up for day 3 of non-stop escape sequences! Except now without the combat encounters like Task Manager, Wire, and Mouse Wheel, because quizzes that constantly interrupt you and crash the game are so much better. Now, fortunately, Chapter 4 finally puts an end to this formula, sort of. You still start in an ominous segment where you're introduced to the semi-reoccurring main antagonist of the chapter, except instead of getting captured, you leave the Dark World, re-enter it, and have a fast-paced escape segment in Susie's Dark World instead. I don't know why every Dark World has to start and end almost the exact same linear way. Maybe the game could start creating actual dungeons like in real RPGs with locked doors, puzzles that span across multiple intertwined floors, and endless enemy encounters that test your endurance. Even Mother 3, which has a relatively simplistic dungeon design, had dozens of branching
Chapter
paths
1
that led
doesn't
to
have
dead
a
ends
fast
and required
paced
you to think about where you're
ending
going while
sequence.
testing your resource
Also,
management with
Chapter
dangerous
4,
enemies.
I think
Something
Chapter 4
Deltarune
did
is
it
afraid
very
of having
differently
because it would
from
be
the
too
other
challenging
ones.
for this game's player base. Deltarune refuses
I
to
mean,
have
it
level
feels
design that
different.
might,
I guess
God
it's
forbid,
still
force
sort of
players
the
to think
same
about
because
where
it's
they're
fast
going
paced,
instead of just
but
mindlessly walking forward as wacky stuff happens. In Chapter 1, an aspect of what made me love the game so much was its absurd amount of absolutely breathtaking music that surpassed every song in Undertale, all in a free demo. Undertale relied a lot on repeated leitmotifs in a way that was certainly unique, but undeniably repetitive and lazy. There's no reason The Ruins should be the same song as Spear of Justice.
yeah, that is
Deltarune
true.
entirely fixed this in
But
Chapter
it's an
1.
Undertale
Not only did it have
criticism.
more instrumental and compositional variety, there was a large array of new leitmotifs for each track. And when songs did share a leitmotif, it served a poignant meaning, such as the king sharing a dark and serious version of Lancer's
I
theme
really
mixed
want
with his
him to see
Cardcastle
like
theme.
I
The
really
songs
want to
were
see
auditorily
him
clear
like
and didn't go
criticizing
overboard
chapter
with
1.
instruments. They kept a strong
Because I
focus on the
wonder
core
if
melody
he
while
thinks
still
chapter
managing
1
to
is
go
like a 10 out
emphatically
of
hard.
10.
In that
Because
way,
he keeps
it's very similar
glazing it
to
every
HAL
time he brings it up.
Laboratories and how they used to handle the music in the Kirby games. Games I'm sure most people agree have incredible music. I still love Chapter 1's music, its emotion, its variety, and the promise of a future that we'll never see fulfilled. Chapter 2 was certainly a downgrade overall, but still carried some great tracks such as Dialtone and Smart Race. Chapter 3 and 4 are a massive downgrade in quality and quantity, even compared to Chapter 2. Of course, fans will deny it by vaguely listing out track names, but unlike them, I can prove it. The instrumentation is generally sloppy, mixing instruments that don't blend well together at all, and ending up sounding
Why are you
cluttered,
showing
unlike
Chapter
previous tracks,
4
which kept their
Hammer
main
of
leitmotifs
Justice?
front and center. A lot of tracks are derivative of their inspirations in ways that feel insulting, like the Backroom theme or the Zelda theme.
I mean, I think chapter themes change to fit the chapters better.
Leitmotifs are used simplistically and excessively. Tenna's theme mixes a bunch of different themes from across the chapter instead of more conservatively selecting what works the best. And the wide variety of unique leitmotifs in new songs that I praised in Chapter 1.
A bunch. Okay. Yeah. There are also a bunch of short songs taken directly from Undertale without being edited to better fit the setting. Really?
Have greatly been reduced. Songs with previously negative connotation
I
are used
think element of
repeatedly in
the
entirely different
thing.
scenarios, creating massive tonal whiplash. I will say, at least the ambient and atmospheric tracks are still really good, such as Tin_Light and Church_LW_Night, and the Sound of Justice tracks. But as an occasional composer myself, I think it's composing on easy mode. There are very few exceptions to this, one of which being Black Knife, which was composed in 2018 with the demo. Something that sadly makes me believe Toby Fox's compositional talent has either regressed since then, or he's just gotten lazy due to fans treating everything he makes as literal perfection no matter what. Or maybe it's just the result of him working on anything but Deltarune at this point, such as Pokemon and Little Town Hero. Sad to be sure, because Black Knife is incredible and on par with everything I've come to expect. Chapter 4 gets a unique battle theme, and while it fits the general tone and setting, it doesn't fit the tone of battle. I think one of the escape segments uses it, and the more positive tone and gradual build-up is far more fitting there. Rude Buster was a masterpiece that stood the test of time, and was designed to be a good, general battle theme for every scenario. No one was begging for it to be replaced, and I've heard it might be permanent from now on, and I cannot fathom why. Aside from Black Knife, I've been shocked by how little these tracks have stuck with me, even compared to Chapter 2. The Titan Spawn theme, which should have been a slam dunk for me, has instruments and audio mixing that blend it into mush. A fan take on the song I've heard, while admittedly less original in its instrumentation, sounds far more clear and defined similarly to Chapter 1.
Okay, I don't get this. I don't get this point. I don't agree with this. This is also very muddy.
The leitmotif sounds great, it just wasn't used well in game. The Titan theme,
Like,
a song that by all means
why does
should
it
have
keep
been a compositional
bringing
and
up
unique song
handmade
that blows
stuff?
your fucking socks off, ended up being one, if not the most boring, generic songs in the entire soundtrack. The progression is incredibly predictable for an unpredictable moment, with incredibly cliche orchestral-sounding strings that lack the punch Toby Fox's music typically has. It's just so goddamn plain, and I don't know what else to do besides play it. You could put it in an RPG Maker game and no one would bat an eye.
I mean, yeah, I think that's what it was going for, but that's not bad, I think. Like, I still
Around 2
like
minutes
it,
in, the song
even
picks
if
up
it's
with a
more
positive
generic.
rendition of the Titan Spawn leitmotif, and it's definitely far better. I'm still not sure if it's a result of compression, but it's still barely distinguishable. Even if it was, it only lasts 18 seconds before being overlapped by the generic orchestral strings again. The song that played when climbing the Titan, despite being compressed to fucking hell, still manages to sound better while keeping a consistent level of tension, mixing in the From Now On leitmotif near the end. So despite Deltarune being over 2 times the price of Undertale, the amount of great, unique songs each chapter has keeps shrinking. I'd like to separate all of the songs and count them all while removing repeated and ambient tracks to prove it, but I'm on a deadline. When Birdley told his sappy backstory in Chapter 2 with sad music playing in the background, I assumed it was a parody of the cliché in character for his egocentric personality, not a serious attempt at being genuinely emotional and phenomenally written, exemplified by the main cast's sort of dismissal reaction to the entirety of it. Despite that, the way it was intertwined with Noelle and the stylized animated visuals still managed to make it acceptable for a humorous side character. Susie's backstory is revealed this way, with absolutely no irony, taken 100% seriously by her and everyone around her, all presented the exact same way Birdley's was. Except it's actually even worse, because Susie's backstory lacks the animated visuals that serve to actually immerse the player in what was being told. Having a character spontaneously face away from the camera and spout their backstory and motives to you isn't good storytelling. It's never good storytelling. In fact, it's the opposite of good storytelling. It's a faux pas in storytelling. If Heartbound did this, you just know it would be mocked to hell and back. Deltarune typically has the problem of being too vague to habituate parasocial relationships between its characters and its fans, but Susie's backstory has the opposite problem of spontaneously and unnaturally telling you everything about her past. This is not how you write a character. This is how you write a Wikipedia article. Something Toby Fox used to be aware of because in the past he gave characters far more natural exposition and character development through casual banter. Something he does right after this chapter when Susie is reminded of something in her past when she sees the piano in the church. Something Toby Fox felt the need to put a disclaimer before because apparently the 30 seconds it takes could be too long for some people. What the actual fuck? And despite all of this, somehow, even when the game butchers its own writing and characters to directly explain their backstory,
in
it still doesn't
the
manage
next
to be
20
clear
seconds
enough
he's
about
going
some
to bring
really
up something
important
fan-made.
details. She mentioned she was always treated as the scary girl, the bad kid, but why? If it was due to some kind of behavior, that seems more in line with her being an actual bully. If it's due to her looking scary, then I'm sorry, but Barney the dinosaur isn't winning any awards next to Snowdrake, Giftrot, or Jerry. The point of other kids pretending to be her friends is a great addition that fits with what she says to Lancer in Chapter 1 in a way that makes the scene retroactively more impactful, strengthening an already great scene by making it a narrative parallel to something she experienced in the past, justifying her anger and betrayal even more. Though it's merely a good addition to her character, it's a good result of her pre-existing behavior that made her double down and shouldn't be the cause of what made her who she is in Chapter 1. The point of her family always moving is an incredibly weak justification for her behavior seen in Chapter 1, even if you believe it was merely a facade. If it's still possible, she might still have to move,
we still
then why
really
is she so
don't know a
quickly
lot
able to throw
about
her
Susie's
apprehensions to the
parents.
side and start becoming great friends with
Like,
everyone
there's still a
beyond
lot we
just
don't know about
Chris?
Susie.
It's not clear if she has finally made permanent residence in Chris's hometown, and if she has, it makes no sense why she still kept trying to push everyone away for so long. These ideas do not strongly correlate with one another. One is about kids probably staying away from her for somehow being too scary. The other is about kids being cruel and playing tricks on her. And the third is about her moving away from other kids and being unable to keep her full friendships she apparently did have despite the previous problems. And that somehow made her a recluse and violently attack people. They feel like a bunch of disconnected ideas added in excess to make her more
it's
sympathetic.
not too
The original
unrealistic.
draw of her character was how she was already sympathetic despite her actions being unjustifiably cruel. It's all wrapped up by saying Toriel was nice to her when she was crying. It's a boring surface level reason for her infatuation with Toriel. 8 years of build-up and suspense, and what we got was that Toriel was nice to her once, bought her food when she was sad, and it made her feel loved when she didn't. Sorry for expecting something more thought-provoking after all of this time. This is why I said it's such a nothing addition to her backstory. Despite the game's insistence on spelling out all of this to the player in no uncertain terms, it's still not satisfyingly explained what culminated in her becoming who she was in Chapter 1. Unless this is the full explanation, which in that case, I think it would have been better if none of this was explained at all. A depressing regression of how she was presented in Chapter 1, and I would have found the complete fumbling of her character far more heartbreaking if I wasn't already dead inside after Chapter 2. So even if you ignore the presentation of the scene and the way it's spoken to the player, so basically everything, the quality of her backstory is still a mixed bag. And as if all of this isn't bad enough, the entire point of the scene isn't to expand on Susie or give her room to develop. The end focus is on making Tenna feel better about himself because he feels like no one cares about him, which is right, no one in the story really does except Spamton, who's sprayed. Those parts of her backstory I just mentioned were all given a single text box each, by the way. I glanced over it in my previous videos, but a lot of my interpretation of Susie
How long
is
has he
likely
been
a result
talking
of the
about
quality of
Susie's
Susie's new
backstory?
face sprites, making every scene she's in feel like a joke at her expense, mocking her. Replace the face sprites with her older ones,
4
and
minutes.
you can see just how wildly the tone of the scenes change as a result. Never underestimate how much an expression can change how a character is interpreted. Tenna's boss fight is a mechanical dumpster fire. It starts out very well with a gimmick on par with Queen's Shield, where he splits the screen in half and makes you calculate where bullets are supposed to be going, as well as being contextually appropriate with him being a TV. Of course he'd change the display. A great twist on the combat system that keeps the core gameplay intact while shaking things up a bit. But unfortunately,
Yeah,
it's
I
only
feel
done a couple times.
I feel like what he's doing is that he firstly he praises something, he glazes something for like 20 seconds, and then he shows something else, which he didn't like.
Times
And
before it's
that
completely
makes it
replaced
seem
with
way,
repeats of
way
the
worse than
minigames
it
you've already
actually
played,
is.
Because God forbid we stick to Deltarune's
Like,
RPG bullet hell gameplay.
his
Some
whole
people
vibe
like
is,
this gimmick because
it
it's
used
similar
to be
WarioWare,
better.
an actually good
So
game.
first
While
he's
I
gotta
agree
show
WarioWare
something
is fun,
that was
the
done
execution
well,
of this
and
boss
then
fight
he's
is
gotta show
objectively worse
something
in quantifiable ways
that was
compared to
done,
WarioWare. WarioWare runs better,
that
a
he
smooth
thinks was
60
done worse.
FPS that gives the player and the game quicker reaction time, a very important feature for such a fast-paced game. Deltarune runs at 30 FPS with a lot of input lag. WarioWare has short title cards that pause the game and tell you what minigame you're going to play next, a necessity with how quickly they start and end. Deltarune did not implement title cards for each minigame, instead immediately putting you in each minigame with an amount of reaction time on par with Soroba's lasers. Actually, occasionally it does have titles, but not title cards.
I'm pretty
except
sure
they
this
don't
guy's
pause the
an
game, they
Undertale
actually
Yellow
cover it while it's
fan.
still playing. Also, I want to play
I wonder if
Deltarune,
he
not
thinks
WarioWare.
Undertale Yellow
If
is
I
better
wanted to
than
play
Undertale.
shittier WarioWare, I'd go boot up an emulator, crush the resolution to 4:3, and change my monitor's refresh rate to 30 FPS, and only play 5 of the mini-games. Though, credit where it's due, the presentation of the gun one is admittedly quite funny. You have an act command to turn Ralsei into a marketable plush, now available for over $30. Remember when people mocked Toby for selling merch of a demo? Good times.
I'm driving a Mercedes-Benz.
This establishes the rule that Darkeners can spontaneously transform into anything they want, at any time, even objects unrelated to what they are in the real world. And yet, strangely,
Yeah, I
during
don't
the
think
night
it's
fight,
very
a battle that
funny.
takes place only a few minutes later,
Yeah, I already
a couple
said what I
steps
think
away,
about
Ralsei
Toby
loses
Fox
the ability to do
selling
this.
more
How
and more
queer. Toby
merchandising.
Fox is putting blatant, intrusive advertising into his game
But
to
yeah,
sell
it's not
merchandise,
that-
drenched in irony and references to an outdated meme to defend it from
Yeah, it's
criticism,
not that
even
deep,
though it
bro.
completely breaks the rules
It's
of how
only
the
a
dark world
small
is supposed to
joke.
function. This happens multiple times during the chapter, and it's some of the most disgusting and downright appalling behavior I've ever seen, and I find it shocking how quickly Deltarune fans dismiss it. It's the equivalent of Sans pulling out a gun and blowing Papyrus's head clean off while calling him a dumb nigger, and having it be immediately undone a second later for cheap laughs. Except at least that wouldn't be advertising a product.
It's
right
not the
after
same
fight, the knight
thing.
kills Tenna, which would have been a great moment
That's
and
not
a
the
showcase
same
of the knight's
thing, bro.
immeasurable power if it wasn't undone in Chapter 4, making the knight look pathetic in retrospect. I don't know why the game is so hellbent on retroactively ruining every impactful moment in previous chapters. Tenna's death was shocking and dark, giving the protagonists real motivation to stop
What?
the knight, but it immediately gets undone off-screen as long as you spare everyone. Using Snowgrave on Birdley was shocking in Chapter
What do you
2,
mean?
but the impact is immediately dampened because he's still alive and recovering by Chapter 4 and only gets mentioned once by Noelle. It reduces the stakes of the narrative, the motivation for the main cast to be proactive, and puts every moment that may happen in the future under intense scrutiny. Asgore could be impaled by the knight in Chapter 5, and I wouldn't be sad, I'd be wondering whether or not the game would actually go through with it. In Chapter 2, there was a precedent set that there would be a more standard final boss to end each area than a more gimmicky one as seen with the two giant robots boxing. Chapter 3 follows this formula perfectly, starting with Tenna's more gimmicky minigame based boss battle before ending with a mechanically standard fight against the knight. Except it doesn't have a boss to fill Spamton's role. The closest you get is E-Ram, a mechanically simple boss fight in an atypical minigame that rewards you for dying repeatedly. In that way, it's more similar to the difficult teacup minigame right before Spamton than an actual secret boss, especially since E-Ram lacks the tragic backstories of the previous fights, probably meant to be made up for by cutting and pasting Tenna's backstory into the area instead. To be clear, this has never been about soul forms. I have never once brought up soul forms as a criteria for secret bosses, so I don't know why I've heard it brought up. Jevil didn't have a soul form, and he was still way better than Spamton. If there wasn't enough time after 4 years to implement a
That is true. I think
secret boss,
Jevil
then maybe
is
you
one
should
of
have
the
planned out
best
game
fights,
better, or
even
cut out the one
still.
that doesn't add to the narrative
Actually, maybe
at
the
all.
best
I don't think
designed
Toby understands
fight.
the ramifications
I really like
of what he just
Jevil.
established in Mike's boss fight. That a character foreshadowed and gradually built up to across multiple chapters will end up being a joke at the player's expense. Do you know how many characters fall into that category? Characters that were foreshadowed, possibly even less than Mike, for multiple chapters? There's Azrael, Papyrus, W.D. Gaster, and even Des. Is Des going to end up being a joke as well? Mike could have been entirely ignored post-Chapter 2, and it would just be a small blemish on the game's story. A small mistake on Toby Fox's part, not realizing how far a small reference could be taken, even though after Gaster you'd think he'd know. However, instead, he decided to lean into it to catastrophic results. If you think that the Mike cutscene is a harmless joke at the expense of the audience, well, it wasn't. Months of development time were wasted on a boss battle that doesn't use the game's mechanics and is entirely optional, having no bearing on the actual plot. Chapter 4's Dark World could have been expanded. Chapter 3 could have been given a mini-boss.
Yeah, that
Susie's
is
Dark
true.
World could have been made more substantial.
It's a fun
Instead, we
fight,
got this
but
boss battle, solely as a
yeah, maybe
marketing
it's
gimmick
too
for the
much for
Nintendo
a
Switch
simple
2,
fan
only
service.
$1,000. And once again, it harms how seriously the writing will be taken in the future. Will Des end up being a joke too? After all, she's arguably been foreshadowed even less than Mike. Maybe Mike will end up being revealed to be a character even after all of this, but now I don't fucking care. Mike was never an incredibly relevant character to the protagonists, at least not
yeah, I
until
do
the game
think
made
Mike
him
was.
one. The boss battle
I don't think Mike is going to come back because it's been so long. Like,
itself
what
is a
does Toby
total
Fox
mess. I
even
shouldn't have to
want to do
explain
with his
why using a
character?
microphone to
It's so
move is such a
confusing.
stupid fucking idea. The music is also a mix of a bunch of Deltarune's popular motifs and a clear jab at making fun of a lot of the great fan songs people have made for Mike. If this song was put onto SoundCloud after Chapter 2 released, everyone would have thought it was complete shit. Hopefully the songs I've used in the background of this video have shown Undertale's fans have arguably surpassed their inspiration compositionally. To give this segment one compliment though, the sprite of the Dice Man straightening his tie is used to great comedic effect. It's shockingly simple, but well done. Deltarune fans are like abused housewives, repeatedly coming back even after being repeatedly mocked and beaten, because they can fix him. In what I can only assume is the last dying breath of Toby Fox's original vision, we get an incredible boss fight with real difficulty and an incredible song. I had completely forgotten about the closet motif because the game completely discarded it after Chapter 1, but I have to say it's unequivocally genius to use it as a motif for the knight, seeing as he's the one who made the Dark Fountain in it. The song is deceptively simple, focusing on its shockingly simple main melody with shifting instrumentation, with a blazing fast 295 BPM and crunchy drums, in line with everything I praised about Chapter 1's music. Does that make all of the bullshit up to this point worth it? No. If you want to play a game with difficult boss fights that test your skill with its originally established mechanics, you can play literally any other game ever made. Though I'd recommend pre-patch Silksong for that specifically. That's not to say this fight doesn't achieve it well though. This fight is proof of what Deltarune can achieve when it plays itself straight and takes advantage of its foundation, even if it's comparatively really easy. Every issue I have with this boss fight is beyond the realm of the fight itself. The Roaring Knight, the main antagonist, a character meant to be mysterious and threatening, shares the exact same black with a white silhouette design as the silly Western-inspired shadow men who speak with saxophone noises. I do not hate the Knight's design, but having any kind of visual
but
overlap
it
with
really
the
doesn't
wacky joke
remind me
characters
to
is
the.
blatantly
It
bad
really
art
doesn't
direction.
remind me
This
of
fight
the
is
Shadow
not that
Man.
hard. In fact, it's really easy. Beating it without the Shadow Mantle is barely even a struggle. The Knight is supposed to be and is treated by everyone else around you
I mean,
as
I'm pretty
dangerous
sure
beyond
for most
comprehension,
people,
and
it's
yet the boss battle
I didn't even bother recording my own footage for the vanilla knife fight because it's so boringly easy. What? For most people, it's the hardest boss fight in the game. What do you mean? Like, maybe this guy is just an amazing player, but still, like, this is the only time he's complained about the difficulty, and it's about wait. Yeah, this is the only time he has complained about the difficulty. It's about the hardest boss in the game for most people.
itself
What?
conveys the exact opposite. Anyone who argues the Knight is still threatening merely speaks in theoreticals, such as the HP bar not specifically saying HP, so maybe we weren't actually hurting it at all, even though the Knight is visually shown to be damaged by the cast and is heavily injured
I
by
mean,
the
I
end
think
of the
it's still
battle. Or maybe the
threatening.
Knight's attacks
Chapter
would have
4
gotten
and
more difficult
onwards,
and powerful,
yeah.
even though the Knight
Especially,
runs away in
yeah,
fear,
in Chapter
and
4,
even if
he's
the attacks
a
were
lot more
double
of
as
a menace.
powerful, they'd still be really
I really
easy
don't
to
get
dodge.
what he's
Or maybe
talking.
the Knight was
Like,
avoiding using its full power. Sure, and Deltarune is all just a dream. You can't disprove that either. There's a mod called the Green Knight that does an incredible job making the boss fight more difficult and satisfying, but it turns out making a threatening main antagonist that you can avoid all of the damage from is impossible. Deltarune played its hand far too early. Instead of saving the Knight for the end of the game where these issues
So
wouldn't
it's
have
just using a
existed,
mod.
it forced it into Chapter 3 to give it something, literally anything, to stand out, and it heavily damages the stakes as a result. After all, what's the point if the main antagonist can be easily beaten even at level 3? While the Chris Slash theory is absolutely true and a shocking but powerful moment of characterization for him, it just works to showcase how pathetic the Knight is as an antagonist. The Knight is arguably not an actual character. The Knight does not speak. It is unclear if it's even conscious of its own actions like humans
it's a
are, or
mystery,
even
yeah.
if it's acting out of its own volition. It would have been better if the Knight actually spoke like he's been implied to, but people took that in bad faith, saying stuff like, "What did you expect him to say? Mwahaha, I'm the Knight, I'm evil, and I'm going to kill you?" I'd show a real example, but I think it was deleted. Oh yeah, I forgot how much more intimidating the king was in Chapter 1 because he was completely nonverbal.
I mean, I don't think it's more intimidating. His design is more goofy. And even if his actions, even if he was kind of a menace, I still think tonight was more of a menace and more threatening of a villain. I really don't get this point. I think tonight is still threatening.
The king, I'm so evil. The Knight doesn't speak because having a character that consciously chooses to do bad things of their own free will would make them a true antagonist, like the king originally was in Chapter 1 and had to be rolled back in future chapters because it's something Deltarune wants to avoid at all costs.
Dude, what do you?
I don't
What are
think
you
it would have
talking
harmed how
about? That's
intimidating
not
the
what
Knight
happened.
appears if he had a single line of dialogue calling Tenna a traitor after killing him. In fact, it probably would have helped the narrative be far more clear. The Knight's attacks are built around having higher movement speed for your soul, something achieved through acting. I'm all for giving acts more utility in combat, but this completely goes against pre-established mechanics. Act buffs typically only ever last one turn, and if they aren't, they're at least given a graphical effect to show they're still active. It isn't an interesting challenge to fight the Knight at a movement speed it wasn't designed around, it's just annoying. Your movement speed should have been set higher from the start via contextualizing it with a text box saying your heart began to race, or had it spelled out after the act that speed permanently increased. If the soul speed has to be higher to make boss battles and bullet patterns this incredible, then I think it should just be done for every battle from now on. The Rude Buster is also highly recommended for this battle with its 5 times damage increase, but the game never incentivized using it before this point. Battles are all too short and easy. Enemy health bars are way too small to even need the higher damage for the TP cost.
It doesn't have to incentivize it.
You stick to the pacifist route and never
It's
attack
just another
anyone,
way to end
making its
battles
utility
by
come out of
attacking.
nowhere for this fight. If only the game had bothered using its battle system more, then perhaps this wouldn't have been an issue.
What?
Party members get swooned instead of downed. While this is an incredible change that greatly increases the difficulty of the fight, it has some major caveats. It doesn't have any unique sprites for your allies being completely unconscious that would have given it far more oomph. Nor does it have a unique sound or visual effect to give it a stronger sense of impact compared to being knocked out normally. Still though, these are small blemishes that only affect your first playthrough, and the fight is so fun that I don't mind replaying it with this information in mind. It's the only fight in the new
This fight
chapters
is so
I've gone back to
fun.
play again because it's just that fun.
Okay.
It's incredible what this game can
Okay,
achieve
so
when it
it
chooses
thinks
to actually
it's fun but too easy.
utilize its core RPG
And
bullet
it thinks
hell
that
gameplay
it's
in a
done
difficult
well.
way.
But like it's too easy
and
and
they
it
ruined
thinks
it
it's...
by nerfing it. The knives during the night fight had unusually big hitboxes by Deltarune standards. They were not forgiving. If you touched them, you'd take a lot of damage really fast. It resulted in tense bullet patterns that were satisfying.
Yet this
and
guy doesn't
rewarding
make
to
it
live
clear.
through.
So is
Unfortunately,
it
they
fun?
had to
Is it a
fix
bad
that.
battle? Is it a good battle? Like what? Is it good or is it bad? Just say it.
By making their hitboxes
I like
so
it or
small
I
that
don't
they
like
can go
it.
right through your soul without damaging you. Because I guess asking players to not go inside bullets for once was too much to ask. This completely
that was
ruins
bullshit.
the fight, making one of the most common and challenging bullets used throughout the battle a complete joke to dodge. I don't know why this game is so insistent on removing everything remotely challenging or memorable. Also, something I
that was a bit
noticed while working on this
unintentional.
video is that the Knight slashing attack is just broken, both in pre-patch and post-patch. I think the hitbox activates where it used to be.
Yeah, you
and
should
not where it
probably
ends
use
up,
better
which would explain
footage
why I
of
always
the
had such
actual
a
night
difficult
fight
time
instead
dodging
of
it.
this
Also,
mod.
the Knight is absolutely one of the holidays. It literally has antlers and a muzzle when it roars. It would be really, really stupid if it wasn't.
Okay, what is he going
Finally,
to talk
at the
about
end,
now?
the player, after
The
20
bunker.
hours
Like,
of
what can you
gameplay,
even
is
say
given
about
a
the
main
bunker?
objective for the party to work towards, that being finding 3 passcodes to get into the bunker. Though it would have been more in character if we just chose to dig under. This marks a big, poorly thought out shift in the narrative because I guess Toby realized the party hasn't been doing anything productive for 3 chapters now. The only thing that gave the bunker any significance in previous chapters was the fact it existed at all, and Chris said something about it to scare his friends. It being made into the main objective of the game feels sudden and sloppy.
It's
as if
a bunker,
wasting
that's
all of
not
its best
how it
material
works.
too early, or at least it would have been its best material if it were given more build-up. The area will still likely be saved for the end of the game, but now the mystery is being ruined through excessive padding. It's funny how, like I said, Deltarune to the main objective of the game feels sudden and sloppy, as if it's wasting all of its best material too early, or at least it would have been its best material if it were given more build-up. The area will still likely be saved for the end of the game, but now the mystery is being ruined through excessive padding. It's funny how, like I said, Deltarune is doing everything
what are you
people knew would
talking
happen
about?
eventually, such as going into the bunker and fighting the Titan, just far too early and far worse than we ever could have envisioned. These characters have no reason to care about Undyne. In fact, they should all hate her and be happy she's getting sacrificed.
What do you mean?
Susie should hate her for getting in her way in the past, and Chris should hate her because she took his dad's spot as the chief of police. The player is quite literally the only character in the story that could ever care about her, and maybe
What
if the
about
game was
Palfis?
clever, it would
What
have played
about
around
like
that by having them convince the main
everyone in
cast.
hometown?
Except I've
She's
grown to
literally
really
the
hate
police.
Undyne, so that plot point wouldn't have worked either way.
Fuck.
The
What is this guy even talking about anymore? He doesn't even know what he's talking about. What?
entire game, the main party
They
and
all hate
Deltarune
her,
have
so
been
they
reactive,
shouldn't
not
save her.
proactive.
Even if the
Despite the
night
common
is...
sense solution being to find whoever is making the dark fountains and stopping them to prevent the roaring, they have done literally everything but that and are now focusing on an entirely different objective, that being saving Undyne. Also, Chapter 2
It's stopping
introduced the
tonight.
mechanic
It's
where
stopping tonight. It was still, even in chapter 1, it was established that tonight was the bad guy. That you will have to face off and fight eventually to stop them from creating dark fountains and doing the roaring. It was
anyone can
always
open a
that.
dark fountain if they
What
want
are you-
to, so
what-
there really is
Oh my
nothing else
God.
they can do about it. Just to make a comparison, Persona 4 spent the first hour of its game establishing the setting, characters, and TV world, and immediately got into the main plot of teenagers trying to fight against and solve a murder mystery.
How do
I'm not the
people
biggest fan
actually
of the
think
game.
this
I
is a
think the
good
gameplay
video?
sorta
How do
sucks, but I
people
was immediately
actually...
gripped by
Why
just how
does
great the
this
plot
have
and
more
setting
likes and
In
dislikes.
Deltarune, it's taken
Am
this
I
long
missing?
just for them to want to do
Will there
anything
be
at
like
all besides
a
hang out with
super
their friends
good
in the
point
wacky dark world.
somewhere here?
This issue
Because
could
so
originally
far
be
it's
dismissed
mostly
because it seemed
horrible
like
takes.
time was mainly being spent developing the main cast of Lightners. Chapter 1 had Susie and Rousey. Chapter 2 had Birdly and Noelle. It would make sense the game would continue in that direction until a full cast was formed and the final act could begin. Chapter 3 would have developed Toriel and Undyne
Yeah,
within
this
the
is a
unique
valid
context of
criticism,
Deltarune,
but he
and
already
Chapter 4
said
would
that
have developed Caddy
this
and
is
Jonkington.
this is
Chapter
like
5
the
would have been the
third
last to
time
follow
he
that
brings this
formula right
up.
before a terrible event where they'd all have to come together in dire circumstances. Except Chapter 3 has foregone that formula to instead focus on the wacky new cast of Darkners because I guess they're more marketable and you're allowed to sell merch of them. Once again, to clarify for the people who will inevitably say it, I'm not saying the game had to do what I wanted, but rather I'm giving an example of more natural progression that Deltarune now lacks. And as we'll be seeing, Chapter 4 doesn't make any progress towards the bunker anyway, despite the main character's efforts early in the chapter, just so it can focus, once again, on the wacky new cast of Darkners with their chapter-confined character arcs. There
What?
being a cliffhanger
That's
ending
not
for a game
true.
with
What
the
do you
next
mean?
chapter
It's about the main characters. It's not about the new cast. There are very few new characters in chapter 4.
chapter-confined character arcs. There being a cliffhanger ending for a
The
game
only
with the next
character
chapter already
in
released is
chapter
also
4
hilarious.
who really
It made
gets
me realize
development
how
is like
pointless they all
Jetusstein,
were
I
and how
think.
little they
No,
actually
maybe not
affected
even
the plot
him.
of
What
each
is it even
chapter.
talking
The knife in
about?
Chapter 1 was merely used as a predictable but clever joke in Chapter 2. And the staticky TV at the end of Chapter 2 had an air of dread to it that the chapter and its characters entirely lacked. The enemy variety is lacking compared to Chapter 2 and even Chapter 1, with Chapter 3 even having 2 reused enemy designs from Chapter 1, because apparently a TV-themed world didn't offer enough unique ideas and they had to reuse older designs, that being the dice and the Rabbit enemies. There are 5 enemies compared to Chapter 1's 8 and Chapter 2's 9, and keep in mind this chapter is the longest yet because of all of the mini-games. Chapter 4 is better in this regard, with 8 unique enemies, but it's still very disappointing for an RPG even when compared to Undertale. The Ruins had 6, Snowdin had 9, Waterfall had 5, and Hotland had 9, which might not sound like much, and truthfully it isn't, but Undertale was a 4-hour game, and Deltarune has already surpassed 20 hours. This is the game's main battle system.
I mean, it
should be
was
given the
over
most development
like
time,
4
but
hours.
as
That's
mentioned
very
earlier,
few
Deltarune is
time.
entirely disinterested in its battle system now. The boss fights don't make up for it, they're hardly substantial. They're no longer the satisfying capstones of each Dark World, they're mechanically disconnected and underwhelming in difficulty.
What do you mean
The two
mechanically
mini-bosses of
disconnected?
Chapter 3 consist
That's
of a
chapter
repurposed
3 was all
normal
about
enemy and the
minigames,
weather
and
couple,
Tenna's world boss fight is about minigames. What do you mean mechanically disconnected?
as mentioned before, repeat a single attack pattern with only a few small alterations. Tenna's boss fight almost entirely reuses the minigames you've already played instead of being a normal boss battle.
Yeah.
The E-Ram fight was a short minigame, and the Roaring Knight fight was actually good, so unfortunately I get to end on a positive note for Chapter
What
3.
do you-
In Chapter 4, there were also
unfortunately.
2 mini-bosses. The Pumpkin was entirely a gimmick, albeit an alright one weighed down by its horrible writing. The Gerson fight was just Undyne the Undying again, but far worse, as well as the easiest secret
Oh yeah,
boss
he
fight
means
this
the
far.
main.
The Sound
Yeah.
of Justice battle was actually pretty cool presentation-wise, but was way too short and simple. It didn't develop enough in the span of its boss battle, despite easily having the most potential. Finally, the Titan fight was an overly simple, disappointing climax with a gimmick that made it far too easy. It was shockingly forgettable.
Yeah,
I like
that's
Deltarune's
true.
core combat system,
It
so
was pretty
sucks the enemy
forgettable,
encounters
even
that
if it
actually
was
use
cool.
it are few and far between, and mostly weighed down by gimmicks like acting minigames that distract from it. They're unironically used the exact same way as Paper Mario's Sticker Star. They're used as punishment for failing an overworld challenge and not as the main appeal of an RPG. Deltarune's combat was the reason I was still willing to play the game after Chapter 2's jarring shift in direction, but unfortunately it couldn't even keep that fun. So across Chapter 3 and 4, there's only one boss that makes it into good territory. In the time between my original video and now, the opinion towards Chapter 3 has inevitably
The box
begun to
will
shift,
say
and that's
Chapter
cool
3
and
and
all,
4
but it's all
suck.
stuff I and many other people have been saying since it originally released. While I absolutely believe Chapter 4 is better than Chapter 3, purely because it doesn't distract itself with a bunch of mini-games and only took a third of the development time because of it, I would still never dare call it anything remotely close to good. This chapter pathetically tries its hardest to go back to the tone of Chapter 1 without the writing to back it up. For example, Chapter 1 didn't have a boss fight that spoke in uwu speak and used sentence mixing to say Lamau so random things before heel turning back to the most serious parts of the game. While a bunch of stuff certainly happens, none of it progresses the goal of the protagonists. It's stuff happening for the sake of stuff
Okay, that
happening.
was
If anything, it
reasonable.
actually damages the
Jackenstein
game's
wasn't
plot by
very...
completely demolishing
I don't
the
really
stakes
like
set up
him
in
a lot.
Chapter 2,
He's
with the
not
Titans
even that
being
funny.
easily defeated by Chris and his party. It's filled to the brim with shallow emotional beats that regress the characters to do simplistic arcs they would have been above a few chapters ago. It took 3 chapters for a
Yeah,
real
but
definitive
chapter 1 had
progressive
Lancer as well. Even if technically, from what you said, Lancer did kind of develop the chapter and bring the story forward. So
gold he
he's
established
technically
for the
right
main
about
party,
that, I
being
think.
getting into the bunker. And even after Chapter 4, despite an attempt being made by Susie, no progress has been made towards that goal, unless the glimpse of the password we saw was meant to count. Finally, after 4 chapters, the wholesome cartoonish bond shared between Chris and Susie and the shenanigans they get up to can finally be accepted as sufficiently built up to, no longer nearly as jarring. Going to the church is something everyone with a brain knew would happen, but it was still executed to the standards I expected with a nice song in the background. However, the game repeatedly prompting you to skip the sermon and eventually doing it anyway despite your choices shows a complete lack of faith in its own writing and world. Disappointing as I was actually invested. It skips over the walk to church as well, similarly to Chapter 2 skipping the ride to school. I assume it was either done because it would require too much effort to develop, God forbid, or because the game is embarrassed by the thought of forcing its players to actually engage and immerse themselves in the world it takes place
Wait,
in.
is
You're able
there
to
an
drink Alfie's
overworld,
favorite fruit juice in front of her, which has some of the greatest
can you
screen
go in
timing and
Hometown in
parody
chapter
of
4? I
Deltarune.
don't
I full-heartedly
remember.
love everything about it. It's so goddamn good. It sucks the style of real humor that Toby has been shown to be entirely competent in is thrown out for more meme-centric humor at every given opportunity. The complete degradation of the Dark World both tonally and mechanically as a world has resulted in the overworld being the only interesting place left, so I can't complain
Oh,
that
so
we're
you
spending
can go
longer than
into...
5
Then
minutes
why?
in it
Then
for
what
once.
kind of
You can take
criticism
Susie
is
to the
that?
diner to eat using Azriel's money. What the hell am I looking at? The answer is nothing. Apparently this cutscene literally cut out the scene and we're left staring into a dark abyss as the game tells us what's happening. Are the millions of dollars from Undertale and all of Deltarune's merch not enough to pay for actual art here? I genuinely want to see Chris and Susie drawing on the glass, but alas, my expectations are too high. Here we get what is quite possibly the worst scene in the entire game. No, it wasn't the rape scene, it was the reference to Among Us.
Don't just reference modern
It wasn't the rape scene, it was the reference
I mean, gotta admit, this room is kinda... Oh yeah.
to Among Us.
Well, I don't really
Don't
care
just
about that.
reference modern shit, you idiot. That's not comedy.
This happens right before the rape metaphor, by the way. If any other indie game
Yeah,
did
he
this, it
likes
would be
to
dragged
mention
into the
rape a
pits of
lot.
hell where it belongs. I was concerned by Toby hiring a bunch of people to help produce the game faster and how it might affect his original vision, and I was right to be because even Chapter 2's supposed internet-based setting never referenced modern memes as much as this. Deltarune's setting is an inconsistent mix of pandering to 2000s nostalgia with stuff like old CRT televisions and monitors, landline phones, old flash games, old internet-inspired blogs for the characters, and references to old Smash Brothers games, while also referencing the modern internet such as Among Us, cute and marketable plushies, and having characters use smartphones. It can't stick to a single time period and appeal to the
What do you
generation that
mean
would
it
find
can
it
stick-
relatable. It has to appeal to everyone by pandering to both, making a setting that's alienating to everyone. A character using a smartphone isn't relatable or cool.
Huh?
It's a reminder that the game is complete fiction, just like a character saying, "He's right
What?
behind me, isn't he?" This is just like the hit game Among Us.
What do you
It's
mean, the
jarring
time
going
period?
from
I'm pretty
entirely
sure it's
scripted
so clear.
cutscenes to full-on free roam segments and
What?
playable conflict as the soul. But
It's
even if it
really
could have
clear.
been
The
more
time period is
gradually
really
built up
clear.
to, I'm glad it's finally being explored outside of dialogue. Being able to watch Chris shamble around, drink chocolate milk, and play the piano is some jaw-droppingly beautiful characterization for him. There are some clear inconsistencies with
For
how he
him?
acts with
What
how
do
his
you
soul
mean
here,
for
though,
him?
compared to
You know-
previous chapters.
man.
Where originally he was shown barely capable of standing, he's now able to run around with enough energy to whack you repeatedly with a hockey stick and play the piano very well. Being forced to watch Noelle and
Yes,
Susie's
Emma
awkward teenage
Undertale was
romance
very
and
tough.
quirky slapstick with the soul is also a torturous waste of time and blatant fan service. Holy shit, Carol's sprite is bad. The shade of blue used is garish, as well as makes her lipstick blend into her skin, and she's strangely short yet also elongated. Deltarune's pixel art shifts from pretty good to pretty terrible at complete random, and this time it's pretty terrible. At this rate, Des is going to look like this. The face sprites look entirely fine, in fact, some even look great, so I doubt she's intentionally drawn to look ugly. They contrast completely with how cartoonishly angry she looks in the overworld. It makes me wonder why so many people want to bang her and not the water with boobs and an hourglass figure. Seriously, what the fuck was that about? I guess Task Manager did such a good job keeping the game relevant in the furry sphere that Toby had the artist do it again. The music in the background is incredibly overpowering. It's clear the game has no faith in the player to recognize the tone of the scene through the dialogue and characters themselves. Talk about subtle storytelling. In most cases, music is important in establishing tone, but in a scene like this, where the worst thing that happens is a mom yelling at her daughter for inviting people over without her permission and using Des's guitar, if it had stuck to pure silence, aside from maybe the whirring of a fan in the background, it would come off as far less cartoonish. Asgore is treated as a joke who eats big trays of crackers and almost sits on people in a repeatedly prevalent and blatant disregard for everyone around him. In other words, the exact opposite of what made him such a thought-provoking character in Undertale. In Snowgrave, he's actually played straight,
I mean,
being
that's
shown to
what
be a
happened in
supporting father figure.
Undertale after his fight. He was kinda turned into a joke.
Chris, getting him some
But yeah, chapter 5 did solve this problem, so it doesn't really matter anymore.
chocolate to boost his spirit after what happens with Noelle. It's inconsistent character writing. Why is he only so astute to how those around him feel during the Snowgrave route, but not the regular route? Though, maybe I should just be grateful he's given an opportunity to be a good character at all like he was in Undertale. Speaking of Snowgrave, Toby Fox looked at his greatest
What?
like he was
Wait,
in
what?
Undertale. Speaking
Rapeless you. Dude, so many rape jokes. Stop with rape. This guy,
of Snowgrave,
this guy
Toby
loves
Fox looked at his
rape.
greatest inspirations, Yume Nikki and Earthbound, and their association with rape, and thought,
What? What? Oh, he's probably going to mention like Jaigas, but like that was only a theory. Yumeniki had an implication, but like it's very different. Like
Every part of this cutscene fights against itself in a way that loops it around into being comedy gold. The scene is heavily brought down by it starting with unrealistic stilted dialogue spelling out the events that happened the night before.
this part of the
Chris
video will
to
probably
Chris.
be
Noelle is telling Chris in
very
explicit detail
interesting
something
and
he did the previous
incriminating.
night. Awesome writing. The audio sting when you first talk is hilariously exaggerated, the over-the-top music designed for the cutscene is hilarious, the dialogue of you repeatedly saying stuff like, "Me, I heard," and "It snowed," is hilariously concise. The presentation is so over-the-top with the color palette inverting and snowflakes on the ceiling spinning from your presence, it's impossible to find it anything but comical. The stilted animations of Chris sliding, the exact same method used at the start of the chapter for comedic effect, are even funnier in this context. None of these additions add to the scene, they distract from it. They distract from the actual horror by making it more about the presentation than the actions actually being played out. Because, just like before, the game feels the need to tell you how you're supposed to be feeling. If the scene had just stuck to the music and vignette and removed the audio stings and color palette shifts, the scene would have stayed far more focused and grounded, and better as a result. So yeah, Toby didn't do it as well as he easily could have. I don't know if it was dumbed down for the people who play the game, or if he just wasn't talented enough to pull it off. But by the end, it gets its shit together, turns off the music, and hits you with a brutally dark visual with a disturbing implication, recontextualizing everything up to this point in a chilling way. I believe games should challenge their players. They're an interactive medium, and if they aren't using it to invest the player, then they're a failure and might as well be television. Make them overcome a difficult boss, make them figure out a challenging puzzle, but most relevantly, make them go face to face with a difficult, challenging subject in an unabashed way, only made stronger by you being the one in control. This kind of pushback is the only thing separating video games from reading a book. This and the night fight are the closest the game has ever gotten to that, and of course, both were immediately undone. I'm not saying everything in a game has to be an agonizingly difficult struggle, but it should provide at least some level of resistance, because the fun of a video game is the achievement of overcoming something. The execution in the beginning is subpar, but I respect the ambition and clear vision it took to put in the game. It tried to be something raw and unquestionable for once. It tried to tackle a subject with grit, just like Chapter 1 did, and I respected it despite its flaws. This scene sent the online Deltarune community into an absolute frenzy because it was interpreted as the player using Chris to rape Noelle. I'm going to double down on the exact same thing I said in my first Chapter 3 and 4 video.
What are you going to say? What is he going to say now? I'm afraid. What will he say? What will he say?
While I do not believe the rape was literal and merely metaphorical, interpreting the scene as Chris raping Noelle, metaphorically or literally, is absolutely valid and greatly improves the narrative of the game.
No! What? What?
The Snowgrave route has had prominent sexual undertones ever since the beginning of Chapter 2.
The sexual undertones ever since the beginning of
Noelle a commemorative ring. Spamton calls her both your hoochie mama and your side chick, and you demand for her to go on a date with you to the Ferris wheel. You spend the entirety of Chapter 2 stripping her
it was
of her
clearly
own
not a
autonomy,
literal rape. Like, it's obviously not that. It wouldn't even make sense story-wise, like...
Into that perspective, it was only natural
it was
that
only
you'd
like,
eventually force
yeah,
the most dehumanizing,
Noelle losing her
invasive form of
innocence.
control
It
on her
wasn't meant to
possible,
be.
leaving her with nothing. Chris inserting a copy of the player's soul into Noelle through the Thorn Ring in order for you to control her is an absolutely absurd plot point that comes out of nowhere.
What? What? That's not what
Blatantly
was...
contradicts everything we understand about human souls and their functionality for the sake of shock value. But when put in the context of sexual assault, the idea is far more natural. It creates a far smoother bridge between the two ideas. Planting the seed of a soul inside of her feels less out of place when it's meant to be an
seed of a soul inside of her. Dude, pick your words better. Pick your words better. Holy crap, dude. My god, I'm going to try it. Can I make them bigger? Yes. Okay.
To impregnation. Fucked up for sure, but it was unquestionably the intention. Chris's violent, disoriented response is far more emotional and justifiable because the idea of sexual assault is rooted in an understandable, disgusting, real-life equivalent. Inserting a thorn ring and creating a soul that way is just bafflingly random and overpowers the emotion of the scene with confusion. All of Toby Fox's biggest inspirations for Undertale and Deltarune, them being Earthbound, Mother 3, and Yume Nikki, are all widely accepted as having depictions of sexual assault in them. And in the case of Yume Nikki and Earthbound...
Dude, this is only a theory. It's probably not even intentional. It's only a popular theory that, like, Gygas is meant to be an aborted fetus or something like that. Yeah, this is probably a rape representation, and it's done very well, I think. Yeah, that theory isn't even true, by the way.
Mother 3 even include jokes about sexual harassment, sexual assault, and prostitution with a minor, which I'm sure is fucking insane to fans of Deltarune who think art is only ever meant to be fun and whimsical, but it's true. All three of those games I mentioned are also designed for a child audience, when Deltarune is clearly designed and treated as a game for teens and adults. But despite all of that, Deltarune's depiction of sexual assault is either treated by fans as completely inappropriate or a misinterpretation, because to admit the scene was an intentional depiction of sexual assault would require you to acknowledge that Toby Fox censors and alters his artistic vision he's had for Deltarune since he was a teenager.
No, it's definitely not baiting. If you were baiting, it wouldn't have made a 2 hours, 30 minutes long video. Man, this is crazy.
A faux pas in the Deltarune community because it indirectly admits Deltarune is an amorphous blob of a game with no artistic integrity, purely designed to appeal to its fandom. And my idea was right all along, that Chapter 1 was the only true, unaltered Deltarune chapter. Because of that, another excuse has been come up with and widely adopted by the Deltarune fandom to excuse such a topic being included in its preceding censorship. The idea that the scene's depiction of sexual...
You're a fucking dumbass. The intention was never for it to seem like Noelle was raped, but your pathetic excuse of a brain can't understand that. Stop playing Deltarune, we don't want you here. The flower wasn't changed due to fan complaints. It was changed due to a bunch of people were replaying to build as deflowering. Well, it was an allegory for. It was more of an allegory for Noel losing her innocence. I don't think it was like meant to imply rape.
Well,
But
assault
yeah, it
wasn't
was probably because. Yeah,
entirely
he's right.
accidental,
This
and
person
anyone
is right.
insisting that it was is just
Both of these people are right.
Oh my god. The rape metaphor was 100% intentional, and it's fucking ludicrous to believe it was an accident. The player controls Chris and visually aggressively forces himself onto Noelle before painfully sticking something in her as she pleads for you to stop, before the screen
Sticking
cuts out and a
something in
visual of
her.
a literal deflowering plays. Despite its flaws,
Dude,
it
where
still
do you
manages to be
think?
disturbing and
Where do you
uncomfortable
think
at the
Chris
end, what you're
sticks
meant to
the
feel.
core?
Toby Fox has played Earthbound,
turtling
Mother
in?
3, and Yume Nikki. He has also made a little game called Undertale, which spawned decades of furry pornography of its characters. He has an entire team of developers and playtesters who would have made the correlation. He knows what rape and deflowering is. Anyone who insists otherwise does so because putting that stuff in a game makes them uncomfortable, and by proxy means the developer must enjoy it in some way. Which, holy shit, never play the original Lisa, you'd literally fucking die. It isn't art's job to make you comfortable. It isn't even art's job to make you happy. In fact, I would argue art has to make you uncomfortable for it to be memorable. The games that stuck with me the most as a kid weren't the happiest, friendliest, easiest games I played. They were games like Partners in Time, Majora's Mask, Earthbound, and Super Paper Mario because
These games are all very good, and I like them a lot. But this guy doesn't deserve them. He doesn't deserve to play these
If the shatter
games.
effect was such an obviously better, more accurate visual, then why wasn't it included from the start? Why did it have to be made from scratch? Why is it so visually different with entirely separate implications? The flower was subtle and thought-provoking. The shatter is nothing but abrupt shock factor. Oh, I get it now. Another, if not the most common and vague remark I've heard repeated about this plot point is that it doesn't fit Deltarune, ignoring the fact Deltarune is the game that unquestionably put it in the game in the first place.
I don't think that sort of stuff has any place in Deltarune.
What they're admitting when they say the plot point isn't a good fit for Deltarune is that they don't like it, and because of that, they don't want Deltarune to develop in that direction. They want Deltarune to go in the way they want. Because how can you say what
Bro,
is...
this is so ironic. You want Deltarune to go in the way they want. That's literally what you... This whole video has been you trying
and isn't a good fit for Deltarune. What is Deltarune's story at this
and
point?
talking
How do you know
about
what it is and what it's
how
not
you
meant
think
to be?
Deltarune
What
should
they're
have been.
openly
How you
admitting
think
is that they don't want the
Deltarune
game's plot to advance in a way
how
they don't
you want the
and that
Deltarune
makes
to
them
be.
uncomfortable. They want safe, paritable characters that do funny dances. Ironically, they're mad they
This
didn't
is
get
so
what they
fucking
wanted. They're mad
ironic.
they didn't get something that appeals
This is so
strictly to the fandom, but
contradicting.
instead got Toby Fox's real, uncensored vision for once. Incredibly ironic,
There are a billion of these I could show in both comment and video form, but I'm working on a deadline. He keeps repeating I'm working on a deadline. Like how many people? Like dude, I don't think many people would care when you release this video. This game sucks because it's not exactly what I wanted it to be like. Basically, your problem with this video is saying that it's not what you wanted. That means it's bad. It doesn't mean it's bad. It means you didn't like it, which I can respect and forgive you for. What I won't forgive you is what you said about Noelle. Absolutely foul, inhumane, disgusting. Even without the player, she would snow grave you for that. I hate this game. It's not what I wanted. I hate this game. It's what I wanted. Well, I think it's kind of undermining of his overall opinion, but it's true that he talks a lot about yeah, how he wanted the game to be, and how he's disappointed and angry the game, even how he wanted it to be.
When I posted my chapter 3 and 4
I haven't
video,
watched
the
your
entire
original video,
animation
so I
had been
don't know how
replaced with a
accurate
single
his
red
comments
pixel.
are.
It was the most pathetic
But
thing I
still.
had ever seen. At this point, Deltarune is not art. Art is willing to have a message and interpretation. If the active removal of the original scene is anything to go by, Deltarune is afraid of having both of those things. In other words, you can't unrape the dough. Susie
You
saying
can't-
furry
oh my- he
degenerate was
said it
also
again,
censored to
he said
furry
it
freak,
again.
which is such a minor change that I'm horrified. Saying furry degenerate was also censored to furry freak, which is such a minor change that I'm horrified of the implications. If that one small optional joke line was considered bad enough to retroactively go back and change, what the fuck is going to happen to the entire story? If my opinion on Noelle's scene has come off as very scatterbrained and inconsistent, then I'm sorry. My thoughts and opinions on things are constantly evolving, which really should be expected. Also, no, I don't believe making jokes about rape is completely off limits when the point of humor is to cope with the darkest parts of the world. Having the screen tint red as you're stuck with no dialogue options isn't a disturbing, genius visual, it's just fucking funny. Especially since the context is Susie seemingly having the inkling that you went to her room to make out. What was so captivating about the Snowgrave route in Chapter 2 was the verbal manipulation you used to control Noelle, and how it culminated in you getting her to kill your classmate. Aside from the semi-intriguing rape but totally not rape scene, Snowgrave has gone full creepypasta, and it has lost the subtlety and realism that
Dude, I'm pretty sure like Spampton implies this. Like this is still fitting. I don't see what's so bad about this. I'm pretty sure like Spampton calling until your voice goes out or something. He implies this. Yeah, this one. What? You're calling friends? Go ahead, kid. Call all you want. So, yeah. Call all you want. No one will ever pick up. The voice runs out eventually. Your voice, their voice, until you realize you are all alone. This is literally foreshadowing to this. It was always the direction. Like this was always the direction. I don't get it. What are you talking about?
Cliche of an old cursed video game in Chapter 3 and Deltarune literally breaking from your choices. It's just funny, on par with what you'd see in a Sonic.exe fan game. I have no clue how Chapter 5 is going to continue now because of this. Any semblance of a consistent through line for this route has been entirely thrown out the window. But I would be lying if I said that it didn't at least make it the last interesting part of the game. Or at least it would be if the game was allowed to stick to any of the decisions you make during the Snowgrave route. In Chapter 2, in no uncertain terms, Birdly was killed. It was why everyone was so excited to see how it would continue in Chapter 3 and 4. Absolutely no one was excited to see him be put in a coma and never get mentioned by anyone again.
Yeah,
while the
that is
manipulation
valid.
and strengthening of Noelle...
It's funny how his only good points are mentioned like 4 or 5 times. He keeps repeating his only good points. That's crazy, dude.
Emotive. Killing Birdly was the impact of the route. It wasn't, oh no, we scared Noelle. It was, holy shit, we killed our classmate. What the fuck is going to happen? Instead, he's put in a coma and only gets mentioned once by Noelle in passing. The spell you used
one good
was
point
literally
per
called
999 wrong points.
It had fatal in the fucking description. It's such a pathetic rolling back of the events in Chapter 2 that I was the most excited to see play out. I wanted Birdly to go missing, awkward situations to occur where you had to excuse yourself or give an alibi. I wanted to see Birdly's family completely distraught from their missing child. I wanted the town police to do more than just be a reference to Undertale and have them investigate what happened to Birdly and get in your way at every given turn. Basically, real events that would change up the story, force characters to react in different ways, and a complete tonal shift into the morbid and downright frightening. A natural progression of the action.
No, he really doesn't have any solid and consistent point. Maybe the point about Chapter 3's minigames, I guess that was the only really solid point. The rest are really small things. And actually, it's not even just that they're small things, it's also that they're just not good. They're not good points. They're very contradicting. He contradicts himself a lot of times.
Not the family who was affected, but Noelle and her feelings. Then it doubles down by deciding to center it about how you assault her. Snowgrave was the last maturely conveyed and thought-provoking part of Deltarune that somewhat followed through on what Chapter 1 established, and it has been made into a mockery of itself in the vein of what you'd find in a fan game. Deltarune Chapter 4 is jaw-droppingly gorgeous visually, if you haven't played another indie game since the original Cave story. It's 2026. The ease of game development has made games easier to develop and prettier
So
than
what do you
ever,
want
such
it
as
to do?
Silksong,
What
Hollow Knight,
do you
Inscription,
want it
Bug
to
Fables,
like
Atlas,
add a
and even
million
Yik. Games that
special
are all cheaper
effects?
than Deltarune, by the way. These are entirely fair
Like what?
comparisons to make now because Deltarune has an entire development team, funding from merchandise, and has been in development for almost a decade.
Yeah, I keep
That's not to say it
comparing
looks
stuff.
horrible. When it sticks to the stained glass areas, it actually looks pretty neat. Unfortunately, most of the chapter is spent in dusty old libraries and not the vast city shown below. The knight is treated as the big, intimidating villain of the chapter that's always one step ahead, except we already beat him in the previous chapters. When the knight summons a titan,
You
it
beat
certainly does
him,
a
but
better job making him a
didn't
threat,
really
even
beat
if it
him.
makes
I guess
the knight
it's kind
come
of
off as
valid
pathetic,
criticism,
needing to
but
summon an
still.
easily beatable titan for him to fight instead. This area is centered around the prophecy of Deltarune, told through easily breakable glass. It varies from being so unfathomably vague it could mean literally anything, such as the girl, or so incredibly specific that it's blatantly clear everything has already played out exactly as planned. It's incredibly inconsistent and blatantly poor writing. Why are Lancer and Asgore referred to so
Really? At
specifically, but one of the
75
main
HP.
light warriors
At
isn't?
75%. I didn't know
Ralsei
that.
as a
I
character
thought
as well.
you
If we go with
drained
the idea
the knight
that
of
the prophecy
all
is
his
as specific
HPs.
as we repeatedly see it is, does that make him literally omniscient? If so, that puts everything he's done up until this point into question. Did he know the king would almost get them killed in Chapter 1? Did he know Birdley would try to open a dark fountain in
Wait, what
Chapter
did he say?
specific as Ralsei as so specifically, but one of the main light warriors isn't? It greatly harms Ralsei as a character as well. If we go with the idea that the prophecy is as specific as we repeatedly see it is, does that make him literally omniscient? If so, that puts everything he's done up until this point into question. Did he know the king would almost get them killed in Chapter 1? Did he know Birdley would try to open a dark fountain in Chapter 2? These aren't epic details to make cool theories about. It ruins his character up to this point, making everything he did an act. If what he says after being yelled at by Susie is any indication, however, he doesn't actually know anything about the prophecy or how the Dark World works beyond what we're shown in Chapter 4, making Susie lashing out at him entirely pointless.
She obviously doesn't know everything.
To evolve on the layout of the chapter, starting with you at the end before setting you back really far, having a main hub that branches out in different directions before finally getting back to where you started. It's a great twist on the formula, especially with its very, very light Metroidvania elements. A great twist that should have been used 2 chapters ago when it would have been more contextually appropriate. Toby Fox mentions in the newsletter that originally it was meant to be completely non-linear, but it was too hard for them to design around, so it was made linear like the previous worlds instead. One of the most pathetic things I've ever heard in my life. However, there is still some elements of it left over in its level design
if it's better
that
for
make
the
it feel
game.
distinct. A massive problem
Like, it's
with
not
this, however,
making
is that
games
the areas
is hard,
lack defining
dude.
set pieces, unique tile sets, or memorable characters. The layout is repetitive and bland, not memorable at all. The same lilac library tile set persists throughout the entire chapter and turns every twist and turn into a forgettable blur. Something that becomes an issue when you aren't just linearly filtered to areas like in the previous chapters, sorry excuse for level design, but actually have to think about where you're going. This is only compounded by some areas just disappearing when you're done with them. This could have been easily remedied with a map handed to you by someone like Gerson. A map similar to what this game's inspiration, Earthbound and Mother 3 had.
Yeah, I used to pose more, but yeah, I'm still hearing the stuff.
Development time to add an
like, I'm
item
still
that
taking all of
displays
this
an image like
in,
the punch card
and
did
if I
in
don't, I'll
Undertale.
just rewind the
puzzles,
video a
however,
little bit.
accentuate one of Deltarune's biggest problems that has been growing since Chapter 2. Deltarune refuses to have real puzzles or challenges in its level design. The moving piano tiles have no downside or punishment for taking decades on. The Rising Darkness deals a pitiful amount of damage if you touch it and rubber bands to create the illusion of tension without ever actually threatening the player. A copy and pasted sprite from the Titan fight chases you and deals a minuscule amount of damage in a dark hallway so that they didn't have to make any new sprites. There isn't a unique song for this either, just a slowed down version of the chase theme that sounds laughably bad. The absolute worst example of this are the puzzles where you find a few pianos, they tell you what tune to play at another piano, and when you get there, the tune you're supposed to play is just hovering over it. No memorization, you don't have to write anything down, you don't even have to think about what to do. You go to point A, then point B, then point C, then back to point A to press the key combination it tells you to. That's not a puzzle. I guess because everyone laughed at the segment with Birdley talking over the mouse puzzle where there was the illusion of actual stakes, it became the standard for every puzzle moving forward. Gerson is a character I find undeniably charming, with cutely written gags that play around how old he is that actually affect gameplay in battles and aren't just silly meme reactions. I just really like old characters, like Oshus and Wickerbottom. He's the first one of the main characters that doesn't have a face sprite for his dialogue, probably for lore reasons, and he shockingly works perfectly fine without them. It makes me wonder why the game has even bothered to use them up until this point when the game is shown to be confident at letting characters be expressive without them. Also, they all look like shit now. He's very clearly meant to fill the same formulaic role that has been repeated since Chapter 2. Being the main reoccurring character in the same vein as Queen or Tenna, but unlike those characters, the game doesn't even bother trying to make him appear like an antagonist at first. He's just an ally from the start.
I mean,
No
yeah,
doubt this
he's
would have
not
been
an
a clever
antagonist.
twist if the previous
The
chapters
antagonist for this chapter is tonight.
had
Like-
real antagonists and not just misunderstood villains that make you engage in their quirky antics, but oh well. Gerson also has an incredibly simple but undeniably well executed premise. Gerson is a dead old man brought back to life by the rules of the Dark World, aware of his circumstances and trying to use what time he has left to write a letter to his son and fix the regrets he has before he passes on. It's a perfect premise for the church. It uses the pre-established rules of the Dark World in a new, thought-provoking way that naturally builds upon its...
He'll probably say that Flower is just an anime, a generic anime character, or something like that. And that he's boring because he's not evil, like, he's not evil and dark like Chapter 1's King. Because Chapter 1 was when Deltarune peaked. Anything past Chapter 1 is terrible.
original concept
The
in a
writing
way I
has
think no one
truly went
expected.
down the
All
drain.
of this is why I like Gerson. He's an old man brought back to life under strange circumstances, trying to fix his regrets in the little time he has. He ends up achieving it, giving Susie a letter to rewrite for his son, and being ready to move on by the end. In other words, finally die for real. It sure would suck if he didn't die for real and was brought back again anyway for blatant fan service, despite his arc being satisfyingly concluded. Unfortunately, it's held back by trying to make a parallel between his son and Susie. Gerson says she reminds him of someone he knows, but they're nothing alike. In order to make
What?
them more
That's
alike,
not,
they had to make Susie
But that doesn't necessarily mean it reminds him of, like, his son. I mean, he must have known more people than his son, right?
knows, but they're nothing alike. In order to make them more alike, they had to make Susie incredibly self-conscious and have him treat
Yeah,
her
he means the dragon, yeah.
like a special ed kid, a change that flies in the face of her previous
Probably.
characterization. There's also the entirely glossed over implication that he's a deadbeat father who left his son to go on adventures. This is why I assumed he was Alvin's brother at first, despite the grave scene in Chapter 2, because it would parallel Chris and Azriel's relationship instead of being an odd father-son dynamic. Definitely strange, but not enough to ruin the character. He's infinitely better than Tenna, that's for sure, but unfortunately, for reasons I'll delve into, I still view him with the same resentment. Susie's character arc in Chapter 4 is some of the most abysmally written garbage I've ever seen, and
Yeah. I don't know. Honestly, he's just saying. He's just saying shit. Like,
completely
Oh my
obliterates her
God.
previous characterization. for
It's
cheap fandom
almost
points
been-
where she's
almost
just
been
a
2
small bean
hours.
and
Oh
wants
my
to keep
God.
doing what she loves, but is put
my
down, but
brain
not
is
actually put
starting to
down by
fry.
those
My
around
critical
her.
thinking
Every
is
scene she's in with
lowering.
Gerson makes her look like a low IQ retard, and I absolutely
What?
hate her. Bean and wants to keep doing this character.
Okay, let's rewind. I'm going to try paying more attention. It's just that after 2 hours, it's becoming so hard.
Written garbage I've ever seen, and completely obliterates her previous characterization for cheap fandom points where she's just a small bean and wants to keep doing what she loves but is put down but not actually put down by those around her. Every scene she's in with Gerson makes her look like a low IQ retard, and I absolutely loathe it for every reason mentioned.
Reddit gold, retard, Reddit gold. Here, kind stranger, take my Reddit gold. Why do
Started
you
this
use
video.
the
Well, I'm
words
sure an arc
in a
like this-
fandom fandom like this and not expect people to roast you and like hate on you for that.
Could be handled well
Like,
by a
this
competent
guy is
writer
just
in a
rage
children's
baiting at this
show,
point.
regressing the morally complex bully, totally not a bully character to an insecure small bean doesn't work. There's no reason the confident Tom
She
girl
was
who
always
beats people up
insecure. Like most bullies, even in real life, most bullies are insecure about something. Like, what even is criticism?
should suddenly regress to being
She
self-conscious
was always
in the
insecure.
world. If it were a consistent trait that she were this self-conscious, she would have entirely given up on acting after messing up in Chapter 1, and she never would have attempted to help anyone again after fumbling it with Birdley. But she used to be above that, she didn't let it bother her. In fact, in Chapter 2, Rousey even sarcastically says she's a master at it, which is laughed off by her instead of being treated as the end of the world. I refuse to consider a throwaway joke in Chapter 2 where Susie heals poorly as anything genuine in a game that refuses to take anything it does seriously. With its current track record, it would have made more sense if it was removed as an option in battle completely. If 10 minutes were spent establishing a rule in the Dark World just for it to be ignored most of the game, and 2 chapters could be spent building up Mike just for it to be a joke, why would a throwaway gag like this be anything special? But it's also become entirely apparent to me that these characters are intentionally written as vaguely as possible to make it not entirely impossible for them to be added onto this way, even if it contradicts surface-level observations or character ideas.
Yeah, he also has got Paper Mario Sticker Star as his banner. Like, this guy is just... I'm unpleasable, yes. Like, dude is the lord of rage baiting, and people actually fall for it. Look how many people fell for this. Look how many people are falling for his rage bait. Incredible.
You're media illiterate if you don't make theories explaining away the game's half-assed writing. People will just say it was shown in subtext, or recontextualize everything they did in previous chapters to fit this new information despite never actually being acknowledged in the chapter through dialogue. Because if something was never specifically denied, it can't be denied. In that way, it's very similar to how the writing devolved in Homestuck, a comic that, much like Deltarune, only had loose ideas planned out from the start and mainly progressed based on fan input. Dave was and is my absolute favorite character in Homestuck. He's the most genuine and authentic character.
I have never read Homestuck, so I can't say anything about these.
It's basically just him talking through Dave when he's writing his dialogue style. He was that cool friend who was always cooler than you. He had a very ironic sense of humor that was far ahead of its time with Sweet Bro and Hella Jeff. He was very ironic, but wasn't entirely poisoned. He just had the sense of humor of the time. At worst, he was incredibly lonely and viewed Rose as a sort of mother figure due to lacking one of his own. It fit the 2009 online friends messaging each other style of early Homestuck perfectly. And yet some people recontextualize him as a closet gay boy masking his insecurity and irony due to the time frame, and he was undeniably abused by his older brother. All because in the very last chapter, he says his brother was actually abusive to him, and ends up dating Carcat in the shitty sequels.
Why are you spoiling Homestuck to me?
Tormenting him. The king is a prime example of this. Everything he did in Chapter 2 was right, there was nothing signifying he was bluffing or going mad from the fountain, yet in Chapter 2, it's all taken back. Rousey as a character is also harmed by Proxy, making him come off as a complete asshole to Susie, brazenly ignoring how blatantly his actions affect her. You'd think the conclusion to that would at least be Susie telling him how he has hurt her, but by the end, it's brushed off, instead focusing on how he hides what he knows, ending with Rousey becoming the poor, pitiable character of the chapter. It also retcons, but once again doesn't retcon because it was never directly stated, that his healing spell only affects the outside of people to give Susie's healing spell a narrative purpose it otherwise wouldn't have. That's fucking stupid. It's very clear that starting with Chapter 2, because each character basically finished their main character arcs at the end of Chapter 1, they've had to be padded out with a bunch of fluff character arcs that go in circles until we finally get to Chapter 7 and the ending Toby wants to make so badly. Chapter 2 had a moment where Rousey was questioning his identity and what it meant to be Rousey, and it never gets brought up again ever. Chapter 3 gave Rousey an incredibly severe inferiority complex that
What do you mean it never gets brought up again? I'm pretty sure it gets brought up a lot in Chapter 4. Isn't that like part of his arc? Yeah, I'm pretty sure in Chapter 4 that's part of his arc, right?
solved at the end of the chapter and never brought up again. Chapter 4 has Susie facing her problems with being shit at healing until Gerson tells her that she should keep trying if she wants to, and then it doesn't matter for the rest of the chapter. Also, Rousey states that he forces himself to smile for the sake of others, which does actually line up with how his face sprites are used in previous chapters, except Chapter 1, the chapter where he was actually a good character. None of this forwards the game's actual narrative or leads to massive conflict to the extent of Chapter 1. They're filler designed to make the parasocial fandom of this game soyjack at the screen because OMG...
Yes, he made a lot of other videos. He made like 3 more.
That's so relatable. And it worked.
Chapter 1 Glaze knows no limit.
Gerson's fate is done well enough. People have interpreted this as Susie being unable to accept his death and trying to revive him for her own sake. Don't get me wrong, it's clear she wants to see him again, but I don't believe it's to that extent. The reason she gives to want to see him again is just far too rational. While I can definitely see where people are coming from with it, aside from her being taken aback by the reveal, she never comes off as all that affected. If you think that's just her putting up a tough front, then I have to point out how poorly she's done that in the past, and right after this scene when she's speaking to the knight. She's certainly distraught when fighting a creepy statue in the dark world that she thinks is him, but in the end it's made about how she's mad at Rousey he didn't tell her how the dark world works. I don't think that route would have fit her character well anyway due to how confident she's always been and how she's threatened to kill and has attacked people to the brink of death before. But even if it was actually a story about Susie trying to learn to accept the death of her mentor, it wouldn't matter anyway because he comes back to life right after. I find the execution of the song that plays in Susie's Dark World tactless. In fact, it gave me a headache the first time I heard it in-game. Probably due to the high-pitched cymbal that's used excessively throughout the song, made worse by the audio compression. Once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Generally, every church theme has an instrument that's higher pitched than it really should be to an uncomfortable degree. If it weren't for that, I'd probably really like the songs, but I just can't get into them. The credits theme for Chapter 4 is far more reserved and tactful in its approach, with a generally melancholic tone that I greatly prefer. I would have enjoyed if it were used as the main theme instead.
I mean, it's fitting for the chapter. Every chapter has got a different credits
that the
theme.
changing time signature isn't done randomly, but actually fits and enhances the setting, paralleling how inconsistent and strangely Susie's Dark World is put together. That's not a jab at the game's design, it's literally what the world is meant to be. It's a thought-provoking and surprising twist on a setting you've been exploring the entire chapter, and unfortunately ends prematurely, and for reasons I'll get into, isn't used to its full potential. It uses the shift from the chapter's previously less linear structure to a typical linear one to great effect, showcasing the sudden shift in world design not only through music and visuals, but also through gameplay and structure. Susie's Dark World, however, doesn't result in anything substantial character or plot-wise. It's entirely used for visual gags that subvert your expectations. There's a lot you can do with the concept of dark worlds twisted by their characters' perception, and while it doesn't contribute anything to the overarching narrative, a perfect game like Psychonauts shows how effectively a setting like that can be used in isolation. In Deltarune's case, it's entirely used for absurd humor that wouldn't have been out of place in Chapter 2 or 3's Dark Worlds. In fact, many similar mechanics already were in those dark worlds. You don't get any insight into Susie or her trauma through visual storytelling like Psychonauts. The one use of Susie's Dark World that
like
could have been
Psychonauts. Dude, why is he comparing games? Why does he keep comparing games?
an incredible use of that would have been the boss fight against her perception of Gerson, but unfortunately, what could have been an easy slam dunk ends up being unfathomably disappointing. After this, I expected Rousey to be
that was not
furious
her
because in
perception
Chapter
of
2, he
Gerson.
broke
That was
face and started
literally the
shouting at Burley
statue.
for even thinking of opening a dark fountain. Something we learn in Chapter 4 would have spawned a Titan. Here, Susie makes a dark fountain when there was another nearby in the light world, all because she...
I think the problem with comparisons is how, it's comparing 2 different type of games that want to make something completely different, and have a different purpose and
There's another
story,
code to
and like
adore. This
like
should
the
have been a
whole
moment
purpose
where
is
Rousey
completely
was developed,
different.
where we'd see a
Like I
darker,
personally
angrier
never
side to
played
him
that
he was
game,
shown to
but
suppress in
still,
Chapter
just
2.
randomly
But instead
comparing
it's
stuff is
Susie who
not
shouts at
good.
Rousey for not telling her this
You
would
should
happen.
just say
It's
what you don't like
absolutely
about it
absurd
instead
and
of
ignores his
comparing stuff.
established anger in Chapter 2, making Susie and her stupidity the focal point instead. Susie gets mad that Rousey is hiding stuff from everyone and brings him to tears, with him vowing to tell them everything he can. That being, I don't know. So nothing is gotten out of the scene, but the presentation is fancy with there being thunder for some reason in the Dark World and Susie's theme playing for the first time since Chapter 1, so I guess it's supposed to be a big moment. This boss fight is a great concept. We just established that the functionality of the Dark World can cause dead people to be brought back to life. We just established that anyone can make a dark fountain and that it's based on and altered by their personality. In Susie's case, it's incredibly warped and malformed, with you smashing through blocks with pianos and walking on ceilings because she clearly didn't know what she was doing. This boss is clearly trying to go for a horror tone, entirely masked in the dark for the entire battle, with creepy music very clearly building up to the disturbing reveal of what he looks like at the very end. It's not hard to make the assumption here that what you're fighting is actually horrifying. I don't think it's insane to expect the horror-themed boss that's in the warped and malformed version of the Dark World to be against a warped and malformed version of Gerson brought back to life when he was already ready to move on, twisted by Susie's interpretation of him. Basically, some kind of amalgam playing off of what Susie thinks of him in a dark and twisted way. It would have been a dark twist on the rules we just established. It would showcase a darker, more disturbing side to the functionality of the Dark World to give the Lightners more motivation to end it, and give more fuel to Susie lashing out at Rousey for not telling them how the Dark World fully works. I think Toby is actually pretty good at horror for the most part, so I was excited to see how it would turn out. But instead, it ends up being one of the statues from the lobby. It's an incredibly disappointing reveal that doesn't use the setting at all. It's not disturbing in the slightest. It's a massive letdown. This could have been a thing in the previous Dark World. It doesn't affect any of the characters as it's not a person they know. It's just an object. And worst of all, it just isn't scary. It feels like this moment was originally meant to be more, but it was toned back at some point to make it less uncomfortable for Deltarune's player base. Gerson comes back to life after the reveal of him being dead for the climactic final boss, and does a heckin' awesome double Rude Buster with Susie. Whoa! And I fucking hate it. It's blatant fan service that ruins the conclusion to his arc, making the scene of his death what came off as the last time you'd ever see him retroactively hollow and meaningless. I don't think Toby Fox understands that what happens later in a game can affect something in retrospect. A scene of someone's death being revealed doesn't matter anymore if you know he comes back to life right after. Even if the game decides the fight with the Titan was enough, and he'll never
that
appear
wasn't
again
his
after.
death. I don't. Why would you think? Like, no,
That,
he was
it doesn't
still
matter,
alive.
because it still spoiled the ending to his character. However, in typical
It wouldn't
Deltarune
make sense
fashion,
for
the
him
end
not
his
to
character is left so vague that it's still
exist
not
in the
entirely
light
impossible
world.
he could reappear in future chapters. Deltarune refuses to let its characters die, be it Tenna, Jackenstein, Birdley, or Gerson. Death is a powerful motivator. It's proof that a narrative has
Yeah, he made
stakes,
two
proof that
fountains,
the writer
yeah.
isn't willing to pull his punches and let you suffer real consequences. It forces the characters of a narrative to grapple with the severity of the situations they're in. Because of this, I can unironically say Deltarune handles the topic of death less maturely than Sesame Street, because even Sesame Street acknowledges that once someone dies, they never come back. Gerson's entire character during his boss fight shifts from being an entirely original concept that builds off the rules of the Dark World in a creative way to an Undertale reference, hinging entirely on your knowledge and love for Undyne. Entirely based off of a single line of dialogue in Undertale that could easily be written off.
People have stated that Eternal Dime, but that seems to be a headcanon because it's not implied. No, that was a score if it was true. This was in Undertale. Yeah, it's not just this line, it's also like symbolism and this dialogue.
Off as a joke about
Yeah, a lot
old
of his
people
dialogue is about him being Chamber of Justice. And his
exaggerating
backstory, yeah.
stories about their past. This is all ironic, considering
Deltarune is not a sequel to Undertale, I mean. No, this is not a sequel. This is not a sequel.
Considering how much fans
Yeah,
insist,
whatever.
this game isn't a sequel to Undertale and stands entirely on its own with absolutely no relation whatsoever.
I mean, yeah, it doesn't really matter. Like, even if you're an Undertale fan, it
No,
still makes
I'm not
sense in
exaggerating.
Deltarune.
He's the Hammer of Justice, a reference to Undyne's Spear of Justice. He shares the exact same dialogue and does a bunch
Like,
of the
what's
same
the
attacks.
problem here?
It
I don't
rewrites
get
his
it.
character into being nothing but a reference to
What do
Undertale,
you
purely
mean?
for the sake.
How does one reference and his quest design ruin his whole character and splendorize it into nothing? Like, what are you
of
talking
fan
about?
service. It's a
What are you
bastardization
talking
of
about?
everything that made him unique. Instead of forcing Gerson into the role of being a secret boss and giving him a shadow crystal he doesn't even use, instead there should have been an entirely separate character like the previous chapters established. Perhaps one that's a dark parallel to Susie, showing what she could have been like if she continued down the wrong path, refusing to change like she did in Chapter 1. Similarly to how Spamton could be viewed as a dark parallel to Chris. His boss battle is so unfathomably easy, even compared to the Knight, and it makes me wonder why so many people depict him as easily defeating the Knight. It's so easy, in fact, I don't even know what happens if you lose it. While evolving the Green Soul to have 8 directions sounds like an obvious idea, it does not work comfortably on a keyboard, which this game was made for. It's a blatant example of more not equaling better. If anything, I think it actually held the design back because it had to be easier to compensate. The 8-sided
I don't
Green Soul
remember
also
this fight because
exacerbates a
it's been a
problem
long
that
time
also
since I've
existed in
played
Undertale,
Chapter
where there
4.
was a delay when moving
So
the
I don't
spear
know.
to different sides instead of it being immediately responsive. The 8 sides means it takes even longer.
Yeah, this
and now
guy
there's a
will
parry
really
mechanic
not like Chapter 5. He's going to hate Chapter 5 so much.
that doesn't
And I
work
won't watch
properly
it, by
because
the
of
way.
delay.
I'm not going to
Absolute
give him more
genius.
views.
Also, the sound hurts my ears. This fight holds no relation to the themes of Deltarune, and let me expand on that. Deltarune's narrative originally had themes of being centered around an unbreakable prophecy. Your choices didn't matter. You had a fate you could not escape. The secret bosses, while inconsistent in their portrayal, were all centered around yearning or having freedom. It's why the Snowgrave route existed. It let you commit vile acts and force control that you otherwise wouldn't have. Gerson doesn't yearn for or have freedom. There are some fucking insane people in the comments who say he's, quote, free because he's dead, which is hilariously stupid with how negatively his death is portrayed. The clear, indisputable message that gets bashed into your head repeatedly during this fight is that the story is left untold and that you should write your own ending. Shifting the narrative with incredibly dark undertones about an inescapable
What do you mean?
prophecy.
That doesn't necessarily mean that the end that now you've got
a cliche and frankly
a choice to like change the ending. That's not what it means. The prophecy is still the prophecy. Like, it will still happen. What's written there will still happen.
Fate. And also having the disturbing implication
get
that
it.
the ending will be nothing and entirely left up to fans to finish themselves. God, please, it would be so fucking funny if the ending was just a cut to black. While the twist on the gameplay for this boss battle was actually sort of fun and clever, and therefore had to be made easier in a patch, the character that does all of that is everything wrong with Deltarune's comedy post-Chapter 1. This boss is a reference to YouTube poops and sentence mixing in a church setting in the serious chapter. This is a type of humor that does not belong and does not work in a video game, but I suppose it's only natural that Deltarune would start using humor not designed for a video game. Of course, the character speaks in uwu speak because his entire personality being a reference to a genre of memes on the internet wasn't enough. The amount of focus the joke of this battle is given is frankly disturbing, as it was clearly designed to be the popular meme phrase that would infect the internet until Chapter 5, and well, it worked. Now, personally, I find that kind of forced popularity in writing incredibly insulting, but I guess that's because I have a fucking brain. The reason sentence mixing works in YouTube poops is because you're taking an already established character and making them say something wildly out of character
and offensive. Yeah, that's true.
Offensive.
I think Jackson Stein was out of place.
They're sickening. I hate gay people. Die!
Neither of which apply to the pumpkin in Deltarune. The pumpkin has no character outside of saying one phrase. Nothing he's twisted to say is shocking or actually goes against what's established. It's all just random for the sake of it, and it's obnoxious. The Mr. Nice Guy bit was the only good one because it was an actual subversion of what little character he had. Also, you can't parody your own work when there are no public expectations yet. If you find this character funny, you're genuinely retarded, and I don't believe you should have human rights. The pumpkin appearing isn't actually
Yeah, I
based on a
expected
time
him
limit
to say
either.
something
It's
like
scripted when
that.
he shows up, meaning most of the difficulty and tension of this fight is entirely an illusion. I really wish Deltarune would stop faking actual gameplay and be a real video game for once. The Titan fight starts out pretty well with a segment where you climb its shell. It's a good use of the new mechanic until you realize the bullets you're dodging only do 10 to 30 damage, then it just becomes boring. Still, it's a neat spectacle, and it's a good showcase of the main trio's cooperation. The actual fights themselves, against both the Titan spawn and the Titan, are shockingly dull and easy. The Soul Glow, while an interesting concept on paper, ends up making bullet patterns easy and repetitive. Each bullet pattern has to revolve around summoning
I
a
think
bunch of
these kind of people, they think that by saying contrarian opinions, by going against what most people think and say, they think they're like superior. They think they're like better, and that their opinions are like worth more or something, and they're more valid.
creatures to fly
Or
around your
something.
soul and feed it free TP.
I've already-
Occasionally there are
y-
some
I
bullets
used
you
to
can't
watch,
destroy, which at
reviews
least
like
makes you
these,
move around a little bit, but they're not as common
Yeah.
as they should be. As soon as a creature that can damage you enters the light,
Yeah, this
it
reminds
slows
me a
down
lot of
drastically and
contrarian
shrinks rapidly, making
reviews
them
and
absurdly
opinions.
easy to avoid. Because of that, it
Like
might
I
be
used
the
to do
easiest
this
boss
shit.
in the
I used to do this shit on Reddit. Like I remember when I was 13, I rage baited the Undertale subreddit by saying a lot of stupid opinions, and like people fell for it. And it's
entire
like, this
game
is the
now,
same
especially
vibe. I'm
with,
getting the same
ironically, how
vibe.
much more TP you get from destroying them. It
This
ends up making
opinion,
TP gain
this whole
functionally
video
the
was
same,
made
but now with an
by
even
me
bigger
when I
radius
was
and even less
13.
risk, and even more reward. Even if the execution was fumbled, the idea of stricter TP management is interesting and would immediately incentivize more strategy and resource management. So yeah, who would have thought a fight against a Titan would be the most easy and dull fight in the game? I've heard a completely retarded defense for this.
A completely
that it's, quote,
retarded. Bitch. However, tonight only lost 25%. Yeah, was gonna tell him tonight before it was a newborn baby. Also, don't forget Liam.
Newborn Titan, so of course it's weak, easy, and I guess boring to fight. That's a headcanon probably stemming from the different
don't know
designs
if
shown in
that's,
Chapter 2.
I
but
don't
it
know the
appears to
validity
directly
of that
contradict
statement.
what Ralsei says right before the battle, where it's implied that the Titan has hatched and has been there the whole time. He never specifically labels it as a newborn Titan at any point, just a Titan. We literally climbed the Titan as a
But
newborn
what
Titan.
was that? Born. I was born. Between your fingers, a faint gray piece kind of behind the dust.
At any point, just a Titan. We literally climb the Titan as it hatches, so it's definitely hatched and definitely fully formed. There's nothing implying Titans grow more powerful with time, or that the one you fought
Yeah,
is
but
weaker
there
than
are
the
like
others.
3
If you want to
Titans,
see
right?
what a real newborn Titan looks like, it's the Titan spawn you fight right before it. We took out a fully
Yeah,
hatched, fully
terroring is
formed
multiple Titans. It's not just one. Yeah, it's way too easy. I agree with that.
Titan.
And it's
Beings
kind of
designed
forgettable.
To be the
Yeah,
world-ending
this is
stakes
true.
meant to be avoided at all costs. In other words, there's no longer a threat. Even
I mean,
if
there
more
is still a
powerful
threat.
Titans do appear in the future as bosses, which they probably will, I guarantee you they will be defeated in the exact same way with very little struggle. That's the problem. It basically turns them into regular enemies on par with the funny Bookman. In fact, the Titan occasionally does even less damage. During the Titan fight, Ralsei shouts to attack it while its mask is down, and if this were against any other boss, even the Knight, then this would be an incredible moment of character growth for him. Going from thinking everything can be solved peacefully in Chapter 1 to understanding that sometimes violence is the only option. Except the Titan isn't a character, it isn't a sentient being like Lightners and Darkners, it's a being summoned solely to do harm, acting out of instinct. It isn't growth for Ralsei to want to fight something that's arguably not even a living being. The scene with Susie smashing the final part of the prophecy is fine on its own. However, this scene and its reception cemented for me that Deltarune fans could not give less of a fuck about the game.
Susie's somehow bleeding. Alright, I'm not used up with rage bait. Manuel is a minor, doesn't get a say. That's boring. The story would be better if she was a say. Also, Federico Fox when Susie's hand starts to bleed because she punched glass. That's too edgy and unrealistic. Susie sees the ending of the prophecy, something that Ralsei was trying to hide from us, as she breaks it with her own bare hands. That's why she's bleeding. Alright, this video pisses me off, so I'm going to point out a lot of things I don't like. Are you stupid? Are you an idiot? Susie just punched glass. Glass is sharp. Sharp objects cause Kaya bleeding.
As much as they revere Deltarune's writing and characters as the work of a literal fucking god, and analyze every single pixel and letter as if intentionally crafted by a mastermind, the moment an objective contradiction happens, nothing is said about it. In fact, they aren't even aware of it, because they could not give less of a fuck about the actual game. They do not know monsters don't bleed in Undertale, and they do not remember the NPC in Chapter 1 directly spelling out that monsters don't have blood and only humans do. Monsters not bleeding is the only consistently stated fact in these games, and Deltarune couldn't even keep that consistent. So, no, it's not because
Yeah, I'm willing. Yeah, that's probably a plot hole. I remember that line, by the way. I remembered it when Susie started to bleed. And like, yeah, that is technically a plot hole, but it's so small. It was only one line in chapter 1, so it doesn't really matter a lot. Yeah, since oh yeah, you're right. You're actually right. Because Sense is from Deltarune, and it does bleed. So yeah, it's possible everyone. Yeah.
Was too edgy. I never said that at any point.
Yeah,
in
yeah,
my
you
original
guys
video.
might be right.
It's because it's a blatant plot hole done for the sake of added shock factor. Even if an explanation is given for why Susie bleeds, it won't fix my first impression of how funny this whole scene was when I first saw it, because I was watching a monster bleed after explicitly, repeatedly being told that they don't. Finally, when you exit the Dark World, the rain has stopped and you're left to bask in silence.
What is
This
he
was
going
where
to
it was
say
raining
now?
somewhere else.
Now he's going to,
Unsurprisingly,
like,
there's a song
yeah.
for that. Except there's a problem. This is
There's
the
a problem.
exact same song that was in Undertale, just randomly interspersing parts of it in between the sound of raindrops.
How many minutes will it spend talking about this?
They couldn't even bother making an original, more fitting take on the song, and because of that, it still sounds like hotel music. There are so many incredible fan renditions of this concept that I've listened to, and yet somehow, when Deltarune did it, it was in the laziest way possible. Boy, oh boy, all of this effort sure does deserve $25. Deltarune is a horrible product for its price, and a horrible video game. There are moments throughout where it's apparent that even with Toby's newly hired developers, the absolute bare minimum is being done for this game at the expense of its quality.
What do you mean,
Instead of spending a
absolute
couple
bare
hours to
minimum?
write some code, or
No.
maybe a shader, a built-in function in GameMaker to animate Tenna's special text for a game that has already been in development for 8
damn.
years,
They actually went out of their way to export it this way. That's horrible. They shouldn't do that.
Fox thought it would be a great
But
idea to
still,
store every
it's a
frame as
very
its own
small
separate
thing.
sprite. All of these funny text sprites add up
Like,
to
I don't
10
think it's
megabytes,
lazy.
which may not sound like much until you realize that's almost 4 times the file size of every sprite in Chapter 1 combined. This is the kind of incompetent game development that has led to new chapters being over 120 megabytes in size, even though Chapter 1 was only 17 megabytes when it first released. What has caused this? Well, hundreds of uncompressed WAV files, and sprites and sound effects from older chapters being kept in newer chapters despite never being used. Which brings into question why they bothered spending so much
I mean, it
development
doesn't really
time
matter. How much?
implementing GameMaker's
Wait,
new
how
split-
big is Deltarune? Let me see. Deltarune. No, I will need to find actually. How big is Deltarune? 1 gigabyte. Roughly 850 megabytes. Dude, that's like, dude. That's why are you even complaining about this? Like, what's the problem with this?
data
It's
file
not even
feature
1
when the idea
gigabyte. It
was to
doesn't
reduce
lag.
how
It
much
doesn't
each
even
chapter takes
lag.
up in RAM. All it did was end up duplicating all of the game's biggest files. At this rate, Deltarune is going to be over a gigabyte big when it's finished in 2030. A fucking pixel art indie game made in GameMaker is going to be over a gigabyte big. Undertale was only 160 megabytes, and that was with the OST. A single chapter of Deltarune is now 150 megabytes without the OST. Incredible job, Toby. Your developers are doing great work. If you still don't believe that's a lot of storage space for a game, then let me put it into perspective for you. Cave Story is 1/100th the size of Deltarune. Mario & Luigi Bowser's Inside Story is 1/5 the size of Deltarune. Deltarune is as big as 145 cartridges of Chrono Trigger. Deltarune is
Yeah, but they had to work on a smaller. They had limits. Those consoles had a lot of
same size as
limitations.
Klonoa Door to
And like, what's the
Phantomile,
problem
which
with
has
this?
fully 3D
It
maps,
doesn't
CD
affect the
quality
story. It doesn't
streamed
affect the
audio, and
experience.
beautiful pixel
Why?
art.
Why
By
would
the
you
end of
even
Deltarune's
complain about
development,
this?
it will almost be the same size as an uncompressed ISO of Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. And if you do compress it, then Deltarune is already 300 megabytes larger than Thousand Year Door. Instead of spending a few seconds to lower the sample rate of a WAV file to reduce the file size, Deltarune is being shit out with hundreds of WAV files that take up 90 megabytes, because fuck you, doing otherwise takes effort. Here's an example of how easy it is. No one cares about actually playing the game anyway, and Toby would clearly rather do everything but work on his game. It's disgustingly incompetent and an unnecessary waste of storage space that I could use for so many other better things, like sculpts of my 3D models. Not to mention how much longer something like this takes to download if you have poor internet speed.
Wait,
the big
what?
issue should
How?
use for so many other better things, like sculpts.
Why is it so large? Like, holy crap, that's
my
a
3D
lot.
models. Not to mention
Like,
how
most
much
of my
longer
3D
something
models
like
aren't
this
that
takes
big,
to
holy
download
crap.
if you have poor internet speed. The big issue here is just that Deltarune fans don't give a shit.
I'm sorry, but how else would you story every single frame is turned in its right. That's not how well, no, these people are wrong, but still, his point is very stupid and doesn't really change anything.
In fact, they love and applaud this kind of lack of effort and the precedent it sets.
I mean, no, they're not loving and applauding it. That's not what is written here. They're just saying it doesn't matter. Because it doesn't matter. It doesn't fucking
For
matter.
the industry. If you aren't willing to optimize your game, then I think you just fucking hate video games and don't want to make them, because that's an important part of game development. I'm a game developer now, I can say these things. I'm sick of people accepting the absolute bare minimum for everything. Deltarune is also $25, an absurd price for indie games which have typically stayed around $5 to $15. As an example, check out all of these indie games that are cheaper than Deltarune.
I mean, yeah, but how long are these games? They must be
This is also
like
more expensive than most AA
way
games were in the
shorter
past, which
than
I'll also show with
Deltarune.
funny
Like,
music.
it's $25 for... Oh my god.
Lower prices are what
Dude,
make indie games so
stop.
accessible compared to double and AAA games. But Deltarune has set the standard that people will pay
It's
more for indie
$25
games,
for
and now
7
we get to suffer
chapters.
the consequences. Silksong being $20 was not an incredible price for an indie game. $20 used to be considered a premium for an indie game. But now, in comparison, Silksong looks like an absolute steal compared to Deltarune. Fully
What?
hand-drawn
It's $5! It's $5! Like, I know money are important, but still, it's $5,
sprites,
dude.
days worth of gameplay, absolutely beautiful and varied set pieces,
$5
bosses
difference.
that actually use the game's
Difference.
mechanics in challenging ways, and a soundtrack composed by Christopher fucking Larkin. All for $5 less than Deltarune. It's especially insulting when there are hundreds of free fan games and ROM hacks on the internet with higher production value and care put into them than Deltarune ever will. Saying Deltarune is too expensive
Alright,
is crazy
bro.
when the price of
Okay,
AAA
bro.
games.
Okay.
You don't want to bring up AAA games as a comparison when one looks like this and the other looks like this. If we start comparing Toby
How
Fox's little
fucking
pixel
long
art
have you been complaining about the price and unnecessary things? No, okay. This is when it starts. No. Yeah, about 5 minutes. Over 5 minutes.
Elden
He's
Ring,
been
it being
complaining
almost
about it
half of
for
the
over
price
5 minutes.
absurd. If you do a very simple
About his
comparison,
and
divide the price by
the
the amount
file
of people
size
who
of
worked on it, and
Deltarune.
compare it to Deltarune, which I'm being incredibly
Yes,
generous,
I read the
counting the
chat.
30 people on the wiki, then Deltarune should really only be about $8. Other issues that show a complete lack of care during this game's development include a time when the game crashed just from walking backwards despite the game having an entire team of playtesters, Susie missing a pixel on one of her sprites during a serious scene where she chases the knight to the bunker, Birdley's battle sprites and sound effects for Snowgrave being kept in Chapter 3 and 4 despite never being used. A lot, and I mean a lot of typos, such as misspelling regeneration with a J. How the hell do you get that wrong? If this game doesn't know how to spell regeneration with a G,
One
then
pixel. Yeah, how did you even see that? One pixel, one single
battle
pixel.
sprites and sound effects for Snowgrave being kept in Chapter 3 and 4 despite never being used. A lot, and I mean a lot of
Yeah,
typos.
whatever.
Doesn't know how to spell regeneration with a G. Chapter-specific game over screens anymore. They all reused the Chapter 2 game over screen in its theme song, which was meant to be a reference to old computer games.
Yeah,
Needless
this
to
video
say,
isn't
it's
even
not all that fitting
criticism.
for a
It's just
television
the smallest, the most useless stuff ever.
or a church. Despite Deltarune undeniably being early access due to the game not being fully finished, it's not labeled as early access on Steam, which is incredibly scummy. Despite Deltarune being over 2 times the price of Undertale, it's still capped at 30
it's still
frames
like
per second.
2 times
a
the
bullet hell
content.
game is capped at 30 frames per second. I'm going to do what I avoided doing in my Undertale Yellow video and give you my violent rant about FPS in games. Deltarune fans are drooling fucking retards who have never played another game in their life and have no idea how framerate works outside of online videos. They have never heard of Delta Time and believe framerate is directly tied to the speed of the game because they've never seen a game engine besides Game Maker. An engine where its biggest developers will give you a cold, dead stare for mentioning Delta Time because they're talentless hacks confined to a shitty engine that wasn't originally built around it. These fucking troglodytes watched Noodle's video on AI frame interpolation and animation and thought it applied to framerate in video games. That running Deltarune at 60 FPS would result in smeared frames and butchered art direction. These people will see a video of Undertale or Deltarune modded to run at 60 FPS instead of 30 and think it's running at double speed. This is all because these people just fucking hate video games. They don't play video games. They watch video games. Because the only reason you could ever possibly believe framerate doesn't matter is if you don't actually play video games and just watch them. These subhuman fucking cattle will immediately turn every single discussion about framerate to how smooth it looks because they don't play video games, they watch them. They cannot comprehend that every process is tied directly to framerate. How precise hitbox collision will be, how often a game will respond to what you input, how many times a game can
Deltarune's frame
separately
rate
do
is
anything.
okay.
It's all
I don't
tied
know why
directly
he's
to
complaining
framerate.
so
Because
much
of
about
Deltarune's
this.
frame rate, it can only skip a text box every 33 milliseconds. If it were 60 FPS, it could skip double the amount of text boxes in the same amount of time while still displaying all of them. The speed at which you can go through the battle menu in Deltarune is crippled due to only being able to respond to what you do 30 times a second. They cannot comprehend the excessive input delay.
Yeah, he said he didn't want to go on a rant about Undertale Yellow's frame rate. He knows it's 30 frames per second.
Because once again, they only watch games and don't play them.
Dude, stop showing that. I get it. I get it. Nobody cares. No one cares. Yeah, it's slightly better. Slightly better. Like, I'm pretty sure even if you played the 60 FPS, you wouldn't be able to notice that much of a difference.
Delay in a game with frame-perfect timing and bullet patterns that require precise movement to dodge. Maybe I want the game to not ignore half of my inputs because the game doesn't run at a
Yeah,
high
it's
enough frame rate
technically
to notice them
valid,
all.
but
Maybe
it's
I
such a
don't
small
want the game to
complaint, it
constantly
doesn't
use
really
motion
matter
blur
most
that
of the
covers the
time.
screen as a crutch because otherwise the stuttering movement of bullets would be apparent. Maybe
It
I
doesn't
want this
feel
game
bad,
to
it's
run as
not
well
even-
and feel as responsive to play as Touhou did in 1997, but they cannot comprehend all of that because they don't play video games. They're just such massive fucking intellectuals that they don't see a difference. Higher frame rates result in an
Yeah, it's too
objectively
much of a small
quantifiably
issue.
better
It's too
experience,
small.
and if you don't like it, then put in the few seconds it takes to cap the frame rate on your monitor to 30. This is actually why I despise frame interpolation on recent PC ports. It perpetuates the idea that frame rate is purely visual. It gives the game the appearance of a higher frame rate without any of the gameplay benefits, which is what you're playing a video game for. For the love of God, if you like Deltarune, play the 60 FPS mod of Chapter 1. It's the best version of the game available. Whenever they speak of frame rate snobs, they always have to rely on hyperbole. Privileged PC gamers with their 24K 1 billion FPS monitors, because the moment they actually say 60 or 120 FPS, it sounds reasonable. They just fucking hate you. They hate video games, and they hate the thought of anyone wanting the option for an experience that's objectively better to play.
Yeah, he's so angry.
Deltarune has become a game of nothing. No consistent theme, no consistent writing, no consistent challenge, and there's not even any consistent gameplay. The 2 times it made an attempt at them, they were nerfed and censored. I have friends who like Deltarune. They like it because it's comfort food, simple and appealing with very little in the way of objectionable, challenging content. But comfort food isn't art. They're hits of dopamine you quickly forget. It's a disgusting insult to video games as an art form to insist something like this is art. I didn't want comfort food. I wanted a game that pushed boundaries, a game that built off of Undertale like Chapter 1 did. In that way, Chapter 1 was more comforting than Chapter 2, 3, and 4 ever were, because it showed growth. I think after all of this, I'm finally ready to move on to Chapter 5, even if I dread the idea. I don't expect it to be bad, I expect it to be mediocre, somewhere in between the quality of Chapter 2 and Chapter 4. I'm already expecting to name it something like Deltarune Chapter 5 was meh, but my slight optimism has consistently gotten me burned for the last decade, so we'll see how it turns out. Why are you playing Deltarune if you hate it so much? If you hate the game so much, stop playing.
Yeah.
Because 1, I have to play it to know if I hate it.
I have to
2,
play
it's
to know if
cultural-
I hate it. You have hated the past 3 chapters. You don't like the past 3 chapters. What do you mean I have to play it to know if I hate it? You just don't play it. Don't play it if you don't
3,
like it. If
I've
you haven't
irreversibly-
liked it for the past 3 chapters, then you're not going to get something like Chapter 1 that you loved so much.
tied myself to this game, and 4, I'm still incredibly emotionally attached to it because of Chapter 1.
Yeah,
also, I
Chapter
want to
1.
spite everyone from
Bro,
last
it's
time.
been how long has it been? How long since Deltarune Chapter 1? It has been 7 years and 8 months, almost 8 years. Dude, you're not. It's been so long. Just let it go, bro. Let it go. Just let it go.
Deltarune undeniably had potential. Chapter 1 is proof of that, and occasionally I can still see glimpses of that potential before they're swiftly taken out back and shot. And I think that's what's so tragic about Deltarune. A game that once promised to be everything I enjoy has begun to encapsulate everything I hate about modern games and media in general.
Yeah, he did
A
play
safe and
Terribit
offensive
mod.
game designed to be as unchallenging and hence consumable as possible to everyone. A game that leeches off of a parasocial fandom to sustain itself in between yearly releases while selling excessive amounts of merchandise. A game that refuses to take itself seriously and uses inane, obnoxious, meme-centric humor to appeal to the absolute lowest common denominator instead of trying to write anything actually clever. Making this video was originally absolutely miserable, and I did not enjoy it in the slightest. But
Yeah,
when
if you don't consume media because you hate it, it's not a good argument. But the problem here is that it keeps consuming it year after year. It has been 8 years. Like, why would you play something you hate so much? Like, if you've been hating on it ever since Chapter 2, which was like 6 years ago, then just let it go. I don't get
it
it.
loosened up near the end, it
And
was
you've been
actually
making
a bit more fun.
how long? You've been spending so much time on hating on this game. How long? Okay, 2 hours and 30. So, okay, 3 hours and 41 minutes. Yeah, 3 hours and 41 minutes just criticizing the shit out of this game. Then literally just stop. Just stop. You're not forced. Nobody's forcing you. It doesn't mean that you can't criticize it just because you don't like.
Still, I need to tone these videos back from now on. I never want to do this again.
Okay, finally. Oh my freaking god. Oh my freaking god. Oh my god. That was so long. It fried my brain. My brain has absolutely exploded. 10,000 comments. 10,000 comments and 1,000 likes. That's crazy. Okay, let's read the comments for a little bit. Tonight has to be one of the Hollywood. Calls tonight him. Rude night Router spotted. I think he calls everybody him. Since he called Chris him, he probably calls every character without an established gender him. So you're not gonna believe this. Chapter 5 video sure gonna be sunshine and rainbows. Yeah. Next question. What was Deltarune? What was the original plan before TKM? Like when episode 3 came out, I want to see Jen them because it doesn't begin Jen doesn't feel the same before. That's probably why chapter 6 and 7 will be the best. Yeah, because it's probably gonna be back to the original draft. Also, was weirdly planned or was that another idea? It was probably planned, if I had to guess. We'll find how some people think Toby is incapable of putting sensitive comment in his game, while Undertale has child suicide. I mean, yeah, it's implied, but really. Amalgamate, I guess it's not really disturbing. Metatron creating a dictatorship, and Asgore killing himself on screen, yeah. This is probably the best example. Toby started his video and cracked out chapter 5 secret boss just out of spite. Yeah. That frame rate rant was satisfying. If people don't play video games, they watch them. Describe TIIM. What is this video? Is this a video about debunking this one?
Let me set the stage for you. You see a video that appears.
I don't like Deltarune chapter 5. Is this a different video? Let's see. Yeah, it's a different video. Yeah, why does he put George Floyd? Should I really react to this? 2K dislikes. Okay. And then he clicked post. Bro managed to play the game without text boxes. Yeah, I'm very inclusive. Love is love. My opinion on black people, well, I support gay rights. Laziest rage bait I've seen. Raw six felt out of character. Bro shows good, keep swimming. I don't know. You know what? Alright. I'm going
Hey
to
everyone,
watch
this is
this,
Me,
but then
Time
I'll go
and I'm
to
gonna be
bed
talking
because
about Deltarune
it's already
Chapter
been
5
so
and
long.
Why I don't like it too much, and I think this sentiment is shared with a lot of players after the chapter's release. And it's going to be one of those things where I feel like it's going to be neutral towards everybody eventually.
Wait, is he like an alt-right person? Alt-right basically means what is he's streaming? He's streaming. What? What?
It's unbelievable. It's these Deltarune I'm fucking it up.
What?
I've only watched his old videos. Yeah.
What?
He sounds different nowadays. He sounds a little bit different nowadays. Before he got into politics. Man, that's what I mean, though. Politics just ruin everybody, don't they?
Yeah.
Charlie talking
From
about
what
game
I've
stuff,
heard, that your entire Deltarune video is about politics. Is he crying?
Crusader is Indian and Mexican.
He's
He also has a rap-
crying? Why is he crying? What the hell?
Anyway,
He's crying or something.
Kanye West cousins. He's constantly talking about, like, you know, right-wing memes and shit. either side, you know, Team Evolution going left wing is just like
What?
a couple of weeks or a month.
You know what? Okay, I'll just
know,
watch the
people
video.
might be split 50-50 on it, right? But as of right now, I don't think a lot of people like the chapter, and it might change in regards to chapters 6 and 7 when those come out, or if there's more chapters. I think Toby probably should have waited, well, maybe not, to release, you know, chapters 3, 4, and 5 altogether. That probably would have made things a whole lot better, honestly. Because as of right now, that's not even just the problem either. There's going to be a lot of spoilers in this video, by the way. And some of those
Just
spoilers
get
we're
to
talking
it.
about right now,
Just
you know,
get to it.
EPG, some X posts.
On
Just complaining
4chan.
about the lack of story progression, but
Oh, on
you know,
4chan. Why do you?
overall, I think
Yeah,
that it's just one of those
to
things. It's supposed to be a
4chan
short
users'
chapter, and I don't
opinion
think
on
there's anything wrong with
Deltarune.
that. One of my bigger complaints actually is the characterization of just the main cast and everything. I didn't have that many problems with some of the new characters or anything like that. It's mostly just how all the characters don't seem to be acting like themselves, and I'm not just talking about Rousey
What do you
just
mean?
acting angry towards Flowery or anything, or
Well,
towards
yeah,
him,
I guess.
or the fact that
Yeah.
you know, Rousey is angry that he's breaking the rules of the game or whatnot, all that meta stuff.
Well,
That's not what I'm talking about. It's just, you know, look at Rousey going after the character Orange, and you know, that is so out of character. He's just playfully messing with them more than usual, and that's another thing. All the characters act like Chapter 4 never happened, and you could say that's intentional. They're just trying to ignore, you know, what's going on in the background. They're just trying to have some fun, just as Toby said, where this is supposed to be like, you know, kind of like a
Yes.
last fun chapter, right? One last fun adventure together. So they're just trying to ignore that. You could say that, and you know, you're probably right, but I feel like that would be pretty hard to ignore. You know, it's one of those things where who knows what the last prophecy panel said that Susie, not the last one, but you know, the second to last one. Who knows what that said? I
this
think a
guy
lot of
seems
people are
like
looking towards,
he's
you know,
he's
some
a
kind of
big
hints
Deltarune
towards
fan.
that. Maybe there was,
He
maybe
doesn't
people
seem
just
like a
didn't really think about
hater.
it yet. But outside of Rousey acting strange, the more prominent one I think is Susie. Susie is completely acting. It's way different than she's ever had been acting. With Susie and Noelle, a lot of people are complaining about the romance in between those two and how forced it is. And I've always thought that that was intentional. You know, ever since that
Really?
original scene, that is obviously the most forced thing ever. But the thing about that is Susie has always been kind of oblivious towards it.
I
Oblivious
don't
towards all
think
Noelle's,
it's.
you know, Noelle hitting on her, all of Noelle's compliments towards her. It's always been something that Susie was oblivious towards. And all of a sudden, I don't know if something was supposed to have happened off screen, but Susie understands that they're dating all of a sudden out of nowhere. It is the strangest thing. Toby should have had more moments with them prior before.
I mean, they had a lot of more. What do you mean? They had a lot of more moments.
Thing to see. And the fact that
A lot
Susie
of
just
them.
won't stop bringing up Noelle from the
Especially in
entire
chapter
it is
4.
so out of character for her to do that. You know, I get that she's changed since chapter 1 and everything a whole lot. Same with Rousey, but I don't know. It feels like the writing. It feels like there's a different director here other than Toby. It feels like this is someone else's writing.
Okay, so
especially
far
with
it's
the blueprint
kind
for the
of
Flowery
alright.
I'm not talking about Aqua. I absolutely love Aqua. Everybody loves Aqua, and everybody loves Seth as well. But there's just something, you know, about some of the new characters and just how the way Susie's acting. A lot of characters just acting not like themselves. You can
Yeah.
say the same thing with Asgore as well, pushing Chris out of the shop like that.
I
You know, there's
guess.
some other things that we're not aware of as to why he would do that.
Maybe.
We saw Chris open a Dark Fountain before, and maybe that's, you know, maybe Chris was involved in what happened with Tessa's disappearance, and Asgore just, you know, immediately wants to get him out of there. That could be the case, but I don't know. Asgore seems very, very different in the Dark World rather than the Light World, and I don't think that's supposed to be the case. It's not like the Dark World changes how people act or anything. The other thing I wanted to talk about was all the meta moments in this. Now, this has always been a thing with Undertale and Deltarune. You know, as soon as you start the game around Chapter 1, when you go to Castletown, Rousey teaches you how to fight, and he just introduces, you know, the soul and how it works, and game mechanics and everything like that. So this has always been a thing in the game. I just feel like it's being pushed way too hard now, and it kind of makes it hard to, you know, insert yourself in this universe and take everything seriously. You know, what's the thing that we should be trying to save in the game here? Who are we trying to protect? You know,
What is this
why
gameplay,
should we
bro?
care for these
Why do they
characters
keep
if
repeating
they know
this?
that they're in a video game and everything like that? It's
Bad gameplay.
what's the thing
Bad
that we should be
gameplay.
striving for here? And I think that this reaches its climax at the end of chapter 5. Again, there's gonna be spoilers here. When Flowery just meets the knight for the first time, assumedly the first time, which, by the way, I don't know if there's a plot hole or not, but, you know, even if the knight didn't face much resistance, why didn't they just destroy the flower pots? Why didn't Chris destroy the flower pots before he created the Dark Fountain for the knight? If they are working together, which, I mean, obviously there's so much evidence towards that Chris coughing during the night fight. At least I'm not even, you know, who knows what the extent of that is. But this really reaches its climax when Flowery tries to get Asgore back and protect him.
Vita perché ti stanno ascoltando 192 persone. Quindi devi toglierti al scrap.
That took me out of the game.
Cosa
Honestly,
volevo dire?
it
Come
genuinely
è
took me
Devi
out of
toglierti
the
al
universe.
come è
And I'm like, well, what
venuta
stakes are to be had in this game
come è venuta
if
l'età?
this kind of stuff is going to be going
Bene.
on? If it's just all one survey
buona.
program
Bene.
by Gaster, it's
Prima parte.
like I just watched the knight just completely kneel to Flower before slaying him.
Okay, this is kind of boring. I think the other video was more
Of course, there's
interesting.
this little battle screen, and the knight just ignores. It just turns all the 999s into zeros. It felt so. I don't know. I don't think this is even Toby writing.
That
this at
was
this
not
point.
the original
I could be
timeline.
wrong, But
Huh?
did Toby actually write this chapter?
Deltarune is cool.
absolutely
Wait,
ridiculous.
so many people. There are so many people saying it's bad, and I don't get it. Why are there so many people always with his opinion? Like, I don't. Why do so many people hate chapter 5? I don't get it. Like, by the way, I'm not going to make any video like replying to all these hate videos because I think
Yeah,
it's
time out.
pointless and it's very boring. Like, these videos are just. Ah. They have no sauce. Their points are either mediocre or like really meaningless. Honestly, I was making a video about how like chapter. Oh, what is this? I was making a video about how most Deltarune theories are bad. Actually, no, about how every single Deltarune theory is ass and they all don't work and they're all bad. And like, I don't even know if I should post it anymore because first of all, I feel like I would be contributing to this vlog. What even is this? Man, I don't go on Twitter anymore. I hate Neanderthal Deltarune community. Are we seriously still bullying? Yeah, whatever. What even is? Oh my God. You know, I actually don't watch Deltarune or Undertale content. I've stopped watching it like ages ago. A long time. What is this? I hate myself for finishing Deltarune. Is this another hate video? Yeah, it's been a long time since I've watched a Deltarune or Undertale video. Even if I make them, which is kind of weird, right? It should be weird. I don't even. Oh my god. What is this? What's everybody so scared about the prophecy? I'm really worried about that. I'm really what? Oh my god. So much. So much. That I really only want to make videos about Undertale fan games and stuff like that. But like, not many are coming out right now. Or like, they're not all that interesting. So yeah, it's kinda, I don't know. Let's see if there is anything. I'm going to look up. Let's see what new videos have come out. I've finally played Undertale. I should have reacted first before. Review, yeah. Undertale makes no sense. This is an Undertale essay, okay. Yeah, Undertale essay. Undertale coding hate video. Which is rage bait, by the way. Yeah, this is rage bait. How many trees are in Undertale? Well, it kinda depends. Well, yeah, you should be able to count. This is very nostalgic because this is the first video. This is the first Undertale related video I've ever watched. I really like this guy. He was my favorite Let's Player. By the way, I'm pretty sure the thumbnail is racist. Yeah, this is very nostalgic. Like, most disturbing crimes in the Undertale community. What? If this is a video about like some Turkey Thomas video where they like expose the predators or something. This is what it seems to be like. Yeah, this guy makes videos about predators and like crimes. I don't know, man. I'm just kind of. Oh yeah. Wow, finally a good video. Isn't that crazy? Finally a good video. A game that will never come out. So many games that will never come out. So many games that will never come out. One game that will never come out. Two games that will never come out. The third thing, which is an animation, is not yeah, another game that will never come out. Another game that will never come out. Another no, this actually came out. That's crazy. Okay, another game that will never come out. Um, another game that will never come out. So many games that will never come out. Oh, Deltarune Friendless. I have never played it, but I've seen some gameplay. It's just fan game, yeah. Man, I don't know why so many people are fixated with Friend. Like, what is so interesting about this guy? I don't get it. Why do people theorize so much about this fucker? It looks cool. Definitely looks cool. Chapter 5, 6, 7. Oh man. Let's see what new things are on Game Jolt. What is this? What is this? Underswap relaxation. Oh yeah, I remember this game. This game is like Underswap, but Sense and Papyrus are female. No, actually everyone is female. Okay, what the fuck is happening to the stream? Okay, this is just switching. We went from looking at theories to random shit. Okay, I think I'll end stream right now. So yeah, bye. That video was absolutely horrible. Bye bye.